Changes then for the rest of the day. Outbreaks of rain through central areas, a lot of cloud in the south, brighter skies further north, and temperatures closer to average for many of us compared with recent days, 5 to 8 Celsius. On Wednesday, the front across central parts finally clears southeastwards, so outbreaks of rain for a time in the southeast, brighter skies to the north and west, albeit with 1 or 2 showers. And then, from Thursday onwards, the weather is about to turn much, much more unsettled. Bye-bye.
We can expect clear skies, leading to a light and warm day ahead. Lovely. Boxed Solar, sponsors of weather on GB News.
It's Patrick Christie's Tonight, and here we do things differently.
It's explaining the absolute madness of this, doesn't it?
It's explosive.
I mean, this is very good.
It's lively.
850. Your government sat there, Sean, and it did nothing.
It's controversial.
And the Middle East has been in turmoil since before I was born.
It's everything you need to kickstart your evening.
Everyone's had their Weetabix tonight. I love to see it.
That's Patrick Christie's Tonight, weeknights from 9 p.m. Only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
We're proud to be GB News, the People's Channel, and as you know, we always love to hear your views. Now, there's a new way of getting in touch with us at gbnews.com/yoursay. By commenting, you can be part of a live conversation and join our GB News community. You can even talk to me, Bev Turner, or any of the members of the GB News family.
Mornings don't have to be tiresome, especially if you have the right company.
Wake up to news as it happens, opinion and debate, and of course, a little bit of entertainment too.
Because when the kettle's on, we're on.
That's Breakfast on GB News, a show worth waking up for.
Every morning from 6 a.m.
Only on the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
We'll spread the news, you spread the word.
Good Afternoon Britain isn't just about us. The wonderful thing about this programme is it's about everyone watching. It's an interactive programme.
Well, there absolutely is something to see here, and we're going to be talking about it more.
Whether it's breaking royal news,
Will, please bring us up to date.
or indeed a particularly punchy speech in the House of Commons,
Very, very curious.
we bring it to you live, and then we bring you live reaction as well.
That's Good Afternoon Britain, weekdays from midday.
Only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
If you want your news to be straight talking,
this is the nightmare for the Conservatives again.
down to earth,
It's not just Nottingham where this is happening, is it?
and most importantly, honest,
Hard-working, middle-class taxpayers, they'll get their book thrown at them.
then catch me, Martin Daubney, Monday to Friday, 3 till 6 p.m. on GB News, Britain's news channel.
Join me, Camilla Tominey, for a frank and honest discussion with those in power that cuts through the spin and gets to the heart of the issues shaping our nation.
You haven't confirmed that you want to stand as leader, but you haven't ruled it out either. This report basically says that he's not fit to stand trial. Is he indecisive? Incompetent?
I deliver the dose of reality Westminster needs. That's the Camilla Tominey Show at 9:30 every Sunday on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
In the GB Newsroom, we bring you the news as it happens.
With our team of dedicated journalists across the UK,
we're ready to keep you up to date with what's happening every half an hour, every single day. Bulletins here on GB News,
the People's Channel,
Britain's news channel.
We will show you very shortly the face of evil. Southport attacker has been referred 3 times to anti-terrorism programmes, but why was nothing done?
The Prime Minister will address the nation this morning after being accused of a cover-up.
That says the Home Secretary announced a public inquiry into the Southport stabbings.
And you're witnessing
Where is
the dawn of the golden age of America. That's what it's going to be. We're bringing it back. We're going to bring it back fast. We're going to bring it.
A new American golden age. Donald Trump is sworn in as the 47th President of the United States as he gets straight to work, signing executive orders and pardoning January the 6th rioters as supporters celebrate in Washington.
Here at GB News, we can reveal one of the grooming gang abusers was involved in attempts to convert a property into a children's care home in Leeds.
Prince Harry at the High Court. The Duke of Sussex will today file his claims against the Sun newspaper.
As it's revealed, nearly 40% of British drivers experienced road rage last year. We're asking, should excessive anger behind the wheel be illegal?
And in the sport this morning, after 5 games without a win, Chelsea beat Wolves 3-1. The Champions League returns tonight with Liverpool and Aston Villa. And Lewis Hamilton meets his new employers, Le Maranello, in Italy.
There's a few dense fog patches around this morning. For many, it'll just be another fairly grey and chilly day, but a few places will see a little bit of blue sky. Join me later to find out where.
Hello there, very good morning to you on this Tuesday morning. I'm Eamonn Holmes.
I'm Ellie Costello, and this is GB News Breakfast. Now, what is the kitchen appliance that you cannot live without?
A toaster.
A toaster?
Mm-hmm.
Interesting.
Interesting. What would you expect me to say?
There's a story in the papers today saying that Gen Z, they cannot live without their coffee machine. If they could choose one appliance in the kitchen...
Never drank a cup of coffee in my life.
Yeah, you're very weird. You've done all these early starts, you never had a
Paul,
coffee.
she just called me very weird.
Well, she's right, isn't she? I mean, it's like...
What would yours be?
You know what? I was thinking toaster with Eamonn, but now I am thinking the coffee machine. Without the coffee machine, I would be...
Lost?
I would be lost. I wouldn't be awake.
Kettle, no? The kettle?
Is there equivalent...
Don't you have a kettle?
You have a coffee making machine. Is there equivalent of a tea-making machine?
Kettle.
Do you remember tea?
No. You get coffee comes out as the complete article. So kettle only does water. You know, the people used to
Teasmades.
People used to have this by their bedside.
Yeah. Did your mum and dad have one of those?
No.
Mine did. And it was like the...
Very posh they were.
Were they?
Posh.
But I'm trying to work out why. Was it because it's very luxurious, so you wouldn't actually have to go out to the kitchen to make the tea? Would it already come on? There was a clock in the middle, and there was a couple of pots, and then you would have...
At your bed, then you don't have to go downstairs to the kitchen.
So that was the idea?
Yeah.
Or probably in those days you had to go outside to the kitchen or around the corner of someone else's place.
It sounds like something out of Wallace and Gromit.
It was. Have you never heard of the Teasmade?
No, that sounds great.
Yeah.
Well, apparently, of all ages, it's actually the washing machine. That is the #1 appliance in a house.
Which one, the dishwasher or the clothes washer?
Clothes one.
Oh, I thought you said in the kitchen,
It's
though.
the #1. I think most people have it in their kitchen, though, don't they? Unless
Right.
you've got a very big house, we've got a separate
Yes, of course, laundry room.
Yes, exactly. Followed by the fridge, the oven and the freezer. But Gen Z, is the coffee machine. Forget the fridge.
Yeah, I can imagine.
They can't survive without their coffee.
And they don't need the washing machine because they send that back to the mum and dad anyway.
Very true. They don't need any of that.
Yeah.
Anyway, let us know. What's your favourite appliance?
It is-
GBnews.com/you'll say.
It's such a busy news day today, and the government has announced an inquiry into how the state failed to identify the risk posed by the Southport killer, and this is going to lead for us today.
Yes, Axel Rudikabana pleaded guilty on Monday to murdering 3 little girls in July after being referred 3 times to the anti-terrorism programme Prevent amid concerns over his fixation with violence.
The Home Secretary has said the country needs independent answers on Prevent. While the Prime Minister described the 18-year-old as violence-sick, the Prime Minister will be speaking live. We'll be covering that at 8:30 this morning.
He also said there are grave questions to answer on how the state failed to protect these 3 girls.
He will, as I say, 8:30 this morning, we'll be covering that. And we're joined now here in the studio by Fraser Myers, Deputy Editor at Spiked. Fraser, he's pleaded guilty. He will be convicted on Thursday. The awful thing about this guy and his horrible face is over many of the pages today. Just scary, awful. He will probably not serve a life sentence because he was underage. He was 17 at the time.
He was, and that's also why his name wasn't revealed for so long. And I think people will remember that information vacuum led to a lot of speculation about who he might be, a lot of false speculation and rumours, which then tragically turned into those horrible riots we saw in the wake of this killing. It's really important that we have this inquiry because, in particular, because we won't now have the trial. A lot of information that would have come to light through that process now will not come through the courts. So what we do know is that there was an extraordinary state failure here. Axel Rudakabana was referred to prevent the government's counter-extremism programme 3 times. I mean, how many times have we heard this phrase, known to the authorities, before someone commits a pretty devastating attack like this? Again, because of the trial, without the lack of trial, there are things we don't know. There are elements of the motive that now don't need to be established by the prosecution. But it does seem as if, and they are arguing that because he had no consistent ideology, he wasn't obviously an Islamist, he wasn't far right, they say there's still no evidence of a terror motive, or didn't feel that he could be convicted for having one. So those questions will remain. But really what we need to get to the bottom of is, why did the state fail so badly on this occasion? How did it let such an awful attack happen when clearly anyone would think that this boy would have been a major risk to life?
What gets me now, Fraser and Ellie, is that I look back to those events and the hideousness of what this guy did. And when the Prime Minister turned up at Southport, when the Home Secretary turned up laying flowers at Southport, they were privy to all of this information. And information is power. And I just wonder what could have, should have been done differently if you had have told the people who ended up rioting on the streets, look, here's the situation, and this guy's done it, and he's been referred 3 times to an anti-terrorism programme, but he has to stand trial or whatever. I think people are capable of understanding that.
I think that's right, and I think the government will hide behind this sort of narrow legal defence that we don't want to prejudice the trial. But I think information like that isn't necessarily going to prejudice the trial. That's just information that people want to be able to hear, that they might have found out in other circumstances, in the wake of other similar scale atrocities. I think the instinct of this government has been to be quite censorious about issues like this. I think that was to their detriment. I think I agree with you, Eamonn. I think had people been able to speak openly about this, had more information come to light, then that could have put an end to the speculation. That could have put an end to the nasty rumours attaching this to Muslims, for instance. I mean, that was one of the first things that happened in Southport, was people attacked a mosque. Totally, has absolutely nothing to do with this tragedy whatsoever. Even now, it seems, in the wake that he downloaded an Al-Qaeda manual, but it seems as if he still had no interest in Islam or Islamism, from what we know. So more information is usually a good thing. Transparency is a good thing, and that's a good thing for justice too. So I really disagree with how the government has handled this, and those questions should be answered too. Although I suspect the inquiry will look more at the various state agencies like Prevent.
When Starmer speaks at 8:30 today, he's very much on the back foot. I don't think people will listen to him and say, oh, that's cleared that up, or the Prime Minister's made the government's position clear on that. I think, yet again, this government has landed themselves. One minute they don't want to give inquiries to the Grooming rape scandal, and the next minute, oh yes, straight away there has to be an inquiry into this.
I think that's right. I think people will be confused as to the approach on this. Why does one issue need the full transparency, and so long after the fact, why does the grooming gang issue not deserve the same transparency? There does seem to be an inconsistency, but I think if you could say anything, is that they would rather manage the conversation, I think, than get to the truth. I think that's the instinct of this government.
Interesting what you say about transparency and transparency being critical, because I think, if anything, this case has highlighted that our criminal system and our justice system, they were obviously set up in a world before social media. And now, if we see a case as horrific and as barbaric as this one, if people don't have the information, they will fill in the gaps.
Yeah.
Is our criminal and justice system out of date? Does that need to be looked at? Does some information need to be put out into the public sphere?
I think so, definitely. And certainly the rules around contempt of court are for an entirely different age. They're written for the newspaper age, not the social media age. They're written for a time when you would have a court reporter go down to a court. They would know precisely what the rules are, what they can and can't say, what they can reveal to the public. That has to change now that we're all our own citizen journalists, effectively. Now, that's not to say that it's a good thing that people will go around making things up, but, you know, the best way and the only way, in fact, to counter lies is by revealing the truth.
And a big question that Yvette Cooper was saying yesterday was there was misinformation at the time that Axel Cabana came across in a small boat, that he was a legal migrant. He was born here.
Yeah.
So the question actually is, how did this man become so dangerous in Britain?
Yes, how did he become so dangerous? What kind of, what led to the sort of violent interests that he was having? I mean, it seems as if these things were being picked up by his school, they're being picked up by Childline, seemingly ignored. Whether they were picked up or ignored by Prevent, it's not clear, but certainly he was referred to Prevent 3 times. I think what you're certainly seeing is, at the very least, a lack of joined-up thinking among the authorities. I mean, we learned that he was planning to attack his own school not long before he went and went and attacked those poor little girls in Southport, and his dad stopped him. And you think, well, why was there no consequence from that? Why did that not lead to significant action in a way that could have led to this horrible tragedy of being prevented?
The age thing gets me, as if somehow, oh, he's too young to understand. I mean, that is the face of evil that you see on the front page of the papers today. Sorry. Thank you. There it is there. And, you know, what do we do about this guy? He's going to be sentenced on Friday, the face of evil. Thank you very much indeed, Fraser. See you again later.
Thanks.
Well, this leads to our poll of the day. Today we're asking, do you trust a public inquiry to get the truth on what happened in Southport? We'll be bringing you the live results throughout the day. Make sure you stay tuned. The final result, as always, will be announced later in Martin Daubney's show. If you want to get involved, just scan the QR code on your screen now or head to gbnews.com/poll.
12 minutes past 6 o'clock. A very good morning, wherever you're watching or listening. You're tuned into breakfast here on GB News with Eamonn and Ellie.
Now, a golden age of America has begun. That's the message from Donald Trump, who was sworn into office yesterday.
Now, almost straight away, he was signing so many executive orders.
Over 100, yeah.
Yeah, including some to reverse the actions of the now former President Joe Biden. Our reporter Jack Carson looks back at what turned out to be an historic day.
So help me God. Congratulations, Mr. President.
In an historic inauguration, Donald Trump was sworn in as the 47th President of the United States. With extremely cold temperatures in Washington, the ceremony was moved indoors for the first time since Ronald Reagan's second inauguration in 1985. As dawn broke in D.C., security kept a watchful eye. The day began with Donald Trump attending a church service before meeting the Bidens, presenting to the world the peaceful transition of power. Thousands of Trump supporters queued for hours to be able to watch the ceremony from inside the Capital One arena.
Oh, I'm thrilled to death to be here. I'm just so happy that this day has come.
It's a really, really hard economy that we're living in right now, and I can't take it anymore. I'm so happy that Trump won.
I feel energetic. I'm so excited. I'm so happy for this.
As the guests arrived for the ceremony in the Capitol building's rotunda, members of Congress gathered with political and business leaders from across the globe. It wasn't long before former presidents took their seats, with one noticeable absence being former First Lady Michelle Obama.
The President-elect of the United States, the Honorable Donald John Trump.
A rapturous applause for the president-elect and a beaming smile on the face of the man whose policies over the next 4 years will shape the future of the world. Now Vice President Vance was the first to take his oath.
So help me God. So help me God. Congratulations, Mr. Vice President.
Then the moment for America's returning president arrived as Donald Trump took his oath of office from Chief Justice Roberts.
I, Donald John Trump, do solemnly swear.
I, Donald John Trump, do solemnly swear.
That I will faithfully execute.
That I will faithfully execute.
The office of President of the United States.
The office of President of the United States.
And as the new president hugged his family, a gun salute to the Commander-in-Chief. In his inaugural address, President Trump hailed the beginning of a golden age.
During every single day of the Trump administration, I will very simply put America first.
Speaking to America, there was one clear message.
We are one people, one family, and one glorious nation under God. So to every parent who dreams for their child, and every child who dreams for their future, I am with you, I will fight for you, and I will win for you. We are going to win like never before.
In a speech full of policy announcements, Trump declared a national emergency at the southern border, pledged to make the USA an energy superpower, and said he wanted to be known as a peacemaker. As the world watches on, the new president is getting straight to work.
The first item that President Trump is signing is the rescission of 78 Biden-era executive actions, executive orders, presidential memoranda, and others.
So this is January 6th. These are the hostages. Approximately 1,500 for a pardon.
Yes.
Full pardon.
Well, let's now go to Florida Republican strategist Amy Takarnian joins us now. Amy, how are you feeling today after seeing all of that?
Well, I'm feeling pretty hopeful. I'm feeling that hopefully that the second term will be obviously more aggressive. It will be more success. He learned, I think, a great deal in his first term, and unfortunately he learned a lot of it the hard way. He had campaigned originally on draining the swamp and found out that that was virtually impossible. You know, we all were very excited his first term in the beginning, and then he continued to surround himself with people who didn't have his goodwill, and unfortunately ended up extremely chaotic in the end and disappointing. So I think the fact that he has gone through quite a tumultuous time period in between. It has strengthened him. It has made him more aware of the people that he surrounds himself with, hopefully. And I think the fact that he already lined up his policy advisors, had all of these executive orders ready to go before he even showed up at the inauguration ceremony. It's upwards of 200 to be said that he started signing in the first 24, 48 hours. And he wasn't wasting any time because, as you had mentioned prior, as soon as President Biden came in, he rescinded a great deal of President Trump's work. And so it's a little bit of a ping pong game. And so now Donald Trump is back again, and he's saying, wait a second, I'm bringing it all back. And he's going to make those issues actually even better. And that's the problem with an executive order. You know, if it's not made into law by Congress, then you can have then the next president come in and rescind all of your hard work. So I'm hoping and very, very very excited actually about a number of the things that he's bringing forward. And I think the fact that he also had his cabinet nominees ready to go, they all made sure to do their due diligence by trying to sell themselves to the members of the Senate before their confirmation hearings take place. And I think the fact that he's you know, ready to get to work on day one is a good thing.
Yeah. What did you make of, I mean, it was a very different inauguration ceremony, wasn't it? It was held inside because of the temperatures. And President Trump had this group of billionaires surrounding him. Jeff Bezos, Mark Zuckerberg, Elon Musk. What does that look like to you? What does it mean in terms of optics when you've got the likes of Biden describing them as oligarchs?
Sure. Well, if you want to actually look and see, who contributed to who, it's all out in the open. It's public knowledge. So, and it's well known that the Democrats had a lot more wealthy individuals contribute, and that doesn't bother me. I was a little taken aback. It kind of gives me a little bit of a sour stomach looking at that photo of like Mark Zuckerberg, for example, sitting there when there was very limited seats, and there are people who have devoted themselves since day one to supporting President Trump. And we all know that Facebook was relentless against President Trump in his first term, and putting out misinformation, disinformation, very hurtful campaign information against him. And so, is it good that he now has these folks in his back pocket, so to speak? Yeah, I think so. I mean, what do they say? The saying is, keep your friends close, keep your enemies closer. And so it's good to have more people supporting you, I guess, and it's okay, better late than never, but it does kind of put a bad taste in your mouth when you look at it and what this individual did at one point.
Lovely. Amy, thanks for your take on things. Really appreciate that. We say goodbye to you. Thank you.
Thank you.
Funny, it's how quickly things are over. Walking with Biden and their wives to the helicopter and seeing him off. And it must be very hard because they basically detest each other.
Yes, and they had tea together yesterday. I can imagine that was awkward.
I mean, that must be so, just, get it over with.
Yeah.
But there he is. He's up and running straight away, as Amy said there. So let's bring you up to date with some of the other stories coming into the newsroom on this Tuesday morning.
And Prince Harry's legal action against the publisher of the Sun newspaper over allegations of unlawful information gathering is due to begin today. The Duke of Sussex is one of the two claimants, alongside the former Labour Deputy Leader Tom Watson, who are continuing their claims against News Group newspapers. They have always denied unlawful activity at the Sun newspaper.
Bereaved families and survivors of the Grenfell Tower fire are to meet with potential design teams for a memorial to be built on the site. 28 design teams have applied to be part of the project, and a short list of 5 is now being announced. The winning design will be revealed this summer, with the planning application expected to win by the end of 2026.
A daily pill, which has been shown to double survival time in certain lung cancer patients, is to be made routinely available on the NHS. The drug can help stop cancer from returning after surgery when taken alongside chemotherapy. Could you see a thing this morning on your way in?
Yeah.
Oh, you could?
No. There was a fog. There was a descent over things, yeah.
That's what I'm trying to say.
Yeah.
It was thick fog. I was very concerned on my way in this morning. Hopefully it's lifted a little bit now.
Yeah, I think
barely
so.
see in front of you this morning.
And you're not a fan of fog. It's very dangerous.
It's very dangerous. I don't trust myself on the road.
Do you adjust your lights?
I probably should, yes.
But you don't?
Do I? No.
Well, it's simple. You get your fog lights on. But I
wouldn't know how to do that.
Well, find out. Find out.
Anyway, hopefully the fog lifts by the time I head home. Let's have a look at the weather with Alex Deacon.
Heavy showers first thing will be followed by a warm, cosy day. Boxed boilers. Sponsors of weather on GB News.
Morning. Yes, it's time for your latest weather update from the Met Office here on GB News. There's a few dense patches of fog around this morning. For most, it's another fairly drab day, but we should see some sunny spells across parts of Scotland and Northern Ireland. Dull and damp over the far northwest of Wales and parts of northwest England. Rain and drizzle at times getting into northeast England too. Elsewhere, many places will stay dry. A few showers creeping into western parts of Scotland. Some patchy rain and drizzle for a time over eastern Scotland, but we should see some brightness across northern Scotland, a good chunk of Northern Ireland seeing some sunny spells. England and Wales staying quite misty and murky, may brighten up a little bit, but overall dull and pretty chilly, with temperatures in most places not getting above 6 or 7 Celsius. The winds are fairly light, and that will allow, again, things to turn quite misty and murky through this evening, and overnight some fog patches will thicken up. Still some rain and drizzle over the Pennines through parts of Yorkshire and at times around the coast of northwest Wales. Much of Northern Ireland, central and eastern Scotland like to have clear skies this evening. A hint of blue on the chart. Temperatures will quickly here dip down below freezing where we have clear skies. But in western Scotland, we'll continue to see quite a lot of cloud, a bit of a breeze blowing in a few showers here, which could turn heavy as we head into Wednesday. A bit more patchy rain developing across the south as well. That's going to lead to a fairly damp start to tomorrow morning here, and still, as I said, some mist and fog around. Where we've got clear skies, we will see those temperatures dipping down below freezing, maybe -1 or -2. Most places just about staying above freezing, but still a pretty cold start to Wednesday. Cold and damp too across East Anglia and the southeast of England. Rain on and off for much of the day here tomorrow. A drier, brighter day for northwest England and North Wales. Some sunny spells here, quite breezy at times in western Scotland with a few showers, but elsewhere we should see some sunny spells. Staying on the chilly side, however, things may well turn pretty wet and windy at the end of the week.
Expect a warm front, moving from the kitchen right through to the rest of the house. Boxed Boilers, sponsors of weather on GB News.
Thanks for watching and listening today. Hang around with us. We bring Paul Coyte into the studio and he'll go through all the sports news the only way that he does after this.
Good Afternoon Britain isn't just about us. The wonderful thing about this programme is it's about everyone watching. It's an interactive programme.
Well, there absolutely is something to see here, and we're going to be talking about it more.
Whether it's breaking royal news, Will, please bring us up to date, or indeed a particularly punchy speech in the House of Commons.
Very, very curious.
We bring it to you live, and then we bring you live reaction as well.
That's Good Afternoon Britain, weekdays from midday.
Only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Sunday with Michael Portillo from 11, only on GB News.
Figures released by the National Child Measurement Programme in 2024 found that almost 1 in 10 children was obese in the first year of school. Children living in deprived areas are twice as likely to be overweight as those in more affluent parts. Organisations like the Prepped Foundation are educating youngsters about healthy eating by giving them the skills to create balanced meals. TV chef James Golding has joined the foundation as the head of food education, and he joins me now to talk about the work. James, lovely to see you here.
Good to see you too. So Prepped used to be Table Talk Foundation, and it's now obviously Prep for Life, Prep for Knowledge. It's basically a charity to encourage kids to have a better understanding of food, but at the same time enjoy cooking and hopefully make better food choices in their life, as well as perhaps share the information we give them with their families.
Do you see them developing an understanding of the difference between a healthy and unhealthy food?
Yes, I think that kids tend to sort of be taught a lot of this in school, but being able to actually ask questions to a chef and be able to cook with produce which they know is one, that it's going to be tasty because they've tasted it, but two, open their eyes to food that they may not have tried before. I think that I think a lot of kids say they don't want to try stuff because they don't like the way it looks, but the way that we produce our sessions, we encourage the kids to try, and I think it really does open their eyes. It's very easy, I think, currently to be able to make easier choices, say fast food choices or that type of thing, and it's obviously giving people the ability to make the right choices, but also the skills to be able to do it. So I think it's something that needs to be addressed and something that really needs to be pushed, and that's what we're doing as a charity.
GB News, the People's Channel.
Join me, Camilla Tominey, for a frank and honest discussion with those in power that cuts through the spin and gets to the heart of the issues shaping our nation.
You haven't confirmed that you want to stand as leader, but you haven't ruled it out either.
This report basically says that he's not fit to stand trial. Is he indecisive? Incompetent?
I deliver the dose of reality Westminster needs. That's the Camilla Tominey Show at 9:30 every Sunday on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Do you know, first day in a new job can overwhelm a lot of people, and, you know, on both sides, whatever. Lewis Hamilton, Paul.
Yes.
He had his first day at Ferrari.
At Ferrari in the Maranello.
Yeah.
And so he's gone to Ferrari headquarters. First day on the job. So what do you have to do you think he gets there? He gets his email.
Oh, I thought he looked well. I mean, let's just have a look at him.
Yeah, we got a little picture of Lewis there.
Overcoat.
He did have a lovely overcoat on. I mean, there we are. Look at that. Very nice. Oh, by the way, there's a theory. See the house there?
Yeah.
There's a little theory. I don't think you see the front of the house again. Of this unveiling. It is nonsense. But just if we can, we'll see that again, hopefully. There we are now. See the house there? There's people have been online saying, that means something. That means something.
It's the right colour.
Well, yes, the door is right, and then you've got the Ferrari is, of course, red, and it's the Ferrari F40. By the way, I'm not a car person. I know a red car and a blue car, but apparently it's a Ferrari F40 outside this house. And the theory online is there are 7 windows on the house, which
means what?
The 7 championships that he's won. And 1 door. Well, there's always going to be 1 door. You're not like a house with like 3 doors at the front, are you?
So what if he wins another one? Will they have to get a window dug into the wall?
Well, what they're saying is that the door is the entrance into... It symbolises his arrival at Ferrari, and the door opens for him to win his 8th.
That's a little
what a
bit
load
of
of
a
nonsense.
reach, isn't it?
It is, isn't it? I mean, a load of nonsense.
I'd say it's a good arrangement all round. Good for them, getting a legend's name. Good for him. New start and...
Absolutely.
The right machinery.
March 15th, Australian Grand Prix, his first race for Ferrari. So
right, let's look at the football last night.
Yeah, quick word on that. Chelsea, they had a bit of a winless run. Everything looked great under Enzo Maresca, and then hit a bit of a wobbly patch. But they ended their 5-game winless run, gone into the top 4. They beat Wolves 3-1, and 2 points. They are now clear of Manchester City and Newcastle into 4th. It was 1-1 at half-time. Their goalkeeper, Robert Sanchez, who's, I've got to say, I think he's a bit of a dodgy goalkeeper, a little bit wobbly, I think. Yeah. Horrible mistake he made yesterday. 4th big mistake he's made this season. But then Chelsea turned it on in the second half, and so 3-1 win for them tonight.
Now, also tonight, Champions League stuff in action. I always think amazing, just, get Aston Villa in there tonight. Who are they playing?
Yeah, they're playing Monaco. So Aston Villa, who are 5th, because this is the penultimate match now in the Champions League. So this is, what do they call it? Match day 7. Match day 7 out, match day 8.
It's boring.
It is. But, well, actually, I think it's better than it was. I mean, Liverpool at home to Lille. Monaco, Aston Villa is at 5:45. So the way it works, top 8 will then qualify into a round of 16. 9 to 24 will go into a knockout, which is basically it's a playoff. And then if you're 24th to 36th in the current league, you're out. You don't drop down into the Europa League this year. That's it. You're gone.
Okay.
So
Marcus Rashford wants to stay at Manchester United.
Well...
He's changed his tune.
Go on, Eamonn. Tell me what you think the reason is he's staying at Manchester United.
No, he's making soundings that he's not against playing for United, so he doesn't want to alienate anyone.
Make it awkward for anyone.
Yeah, for anyone. I mean, I don't know if there is a place for him at United anymore.
Well, he hasn't played in, 9 games, I don't think he's played in.
Yeah.
See, there were teams abroad. I mean, he'd said that he was open to the new challenge. I'm open to a new challenge. He wants out. But the sticking point is the 325 grand a week that he earns, and nobody is going to be prepared to pay that, you would think. He still wants that. He's saying, I'm prepared to fight for my place, and obviously he's trying to smooth things over because it seems that nobody's interested. And, for example, you've got Juventus, who seemed interested. Their top paid player is Alvaro Morata.
Who gets?
Morata, 150 grand a week. So and Manchester United are obviously saying, well, if you want him on loan, you've got to pay his wages. So nobody's prepared to pay that sort of money. So he'll probably stay where he is.
How do they pay such big wages? I'm not saying this applies to Marcus Rashford, but to relatively ordinary players.
Yeah, well, that's a huge mistake, isn't it? It's a huge mistake. And what is also interesting is when you get people at football clubs or talking about football clubs saying, well, how come someone in the office can be earning such terrible money and then you've got this player earning this? You're trying to save money on paper, but then you've got this player earning this. And their argument always is, well, the playing stuff, that runs like a completely different business. So it's like you have all these different businesses within one company. But they pay the money and they've made the mistake in the first place. But 325 grand, is it worth it? I don't think
you've got to
so.
look at things. I mean, you look at us three and you think if one of us was earning so much more than the other two, it would
I know.
It would be.
Thank goodness we're all earning exactly the same money. Thank goodness.
I hope
for that.
not.
That's what I hear.
Anyway,
that's what I was told.
You got a couple. You got a couple of signings. City have signed a new defender.
Abdulkadir Kusanov.
Right. Yeah.
Did you know he is the first player to play in the Premier League from Uzbekistan?
Oh.
Where is Uzbekistan?
It's right next to Vrastanistan. It's right near there.
Yeah, exactly.
And across the way from Afghanistan. It's near all of those places.
And so he's
First
signed.
player.
It's a done deal in the
It's all
January
done.
window.
Yep. He's the 126th nationality to play in the Premier League. Here's a question for you.
Yes.
There's countries that have only had one player represent them in the Premier League since it began back in 92-93.
Wow.
So how many countries do you think have had only one player represent them? 5. Little higher, but not far off.
7.
19.
Oh, that's quite a bit high.
Well, yeah, but when you've got 126 countries,
I think that is
it's not far off.
higher. I agree. I thought you were led astray there.
I was led astray.
I was giving you the wrong indication there. He sees no difference between 5 and 7 and 19.
That's quite a big difference there.
Hey, listen, I got CSE 4 in maths.
Yeah.
Okay.
Victor Wanyama from Kenya. Faroe Islands, Gunnar Nielsen.
We'll see you after 7 o'clock, OK, my friend?
I'll compile some more names for you.
Right.
We'll look forward to
Look forward to that one.
Thank you.
Now, with 50 grand, how many players could we buy for the Premier League?
Not a lot. Maybe a quarter of one.
But for you, it could change your life. It's the Great British Giveaway. Have a go.
It's just 2 weeks left to grab your chance to win our biggest cash prize so far. £50,000 in tax-free cash. How would you react if you won?
Oh my God.
That's a big surprise.
Amazing. Just the best feeling ever.
I'm in shock. That is absolutely fantastic.
Thank you.
For another chance to win £50,000 cash, text cash to 63232. One entry costs £2 plus one standard network rate message. Or text bonus to 63232. 5 entries cost £5 plus one standard network rate message. Go to gbnews.com/win. Entries start from just £2. You can call 0903 681 3232. Calls cost £2 plus your network access charge. Or post your name and number to GB10 PO Box 8690 Derby DE1 9TT. UK only. Entrance must be 18 or over. Lines close at 6 p.m. on the 31st of January. Please check the closing time if listening or watching on demand. Good luck.
The papers today, who have we got?
Laura McKevitt and
like
Andy
her.
Williams.
Like him as
you
well.
like them both, and
Yes.
you will too. So do stay tuned. This
Very
is
good.
GB News Breakfast with Eamonn and Ellie.
The latest GB News travel.
Good morning, I'm Russell Holding. Across the Norfolk-Suffolk border, the A143 is closed in both directions between Harleston and Bungay after an accident late last night. In Oxfordshire, the A40 is closed in both directions for an investigation. Westbound's closed from Headington to Marston, and eastbound's closed from the Cutslow roundabout to Headington. In London, the North Circular's blocked northbound, where a car's overturned between Acton and Ealing, causing queues in both directions. And also in London, the A315 is blocked by an accident eastbound on the High Street in Hounslow. On the M26 in Kent, there are westbound queues approaching the M25 because of roadworks. Gatwick Express train services have been stopped between Gatwick Airport and Brighton because of a track fault, and trains aren't running between Brockenhurst and Leamington Pier because of a shortage of staff. And that's the latest.
You can stay up to date throughout the day by visiting our website, gbnews.com.
This is GB News, Britain's news channel.
Lately, it's getting much better. The people getting more educated in terms of overall well-being of the skin health rather than temporary aesthetic treatments. Because most of the treatments in aesthetic, it doesn't change the texture of the skin. It just gives like volumetric result or remove the wrinkles temporarily.
So what are the most popular treatments that people are after?
According to a statistic report, first is anti-wrinkle, then dermal filler, then energy-based device.
Yeah.
But lately, biosimulators also became very popular. And
So what do you mean by biosimulators?
biosimulator, any substance that can change the texture of the skin, or like it will lead to postpone the aging process, or proliferate more collagen, increase the elasticity of the skin, such as polynucleotide or exosome, or different vitamins and minerals in a form of mesotherapy considered as a biosimulator.
Turkey's a particularly popular destination because the costs are so much lower. There have also been a lot of horror stories about what can happen when things go wrong, even people dying from post-surgery complications. What would you advise people?
Choose, as a practitioner or surgeon, very carefully, and never prioritize price over quality. This is your face, after all, your body, after all. And mistakes can be reversible. It can be irreversible, and sometimes it's not like a booking restaurant or hotel. It's a sensitive matter that can affect their confidence and skin and body for life. So they need to choose very wisely. They need to search what kind of methodology that particular surgeon, they perform the treatments. Are they using any safety tools?
GB News, the People's Channel.
Welcome back. We're going through the papers now with former Conservative Special Advisor Laura McKevitt and political commentator Andy Williams.
Lovely to see both of you. Do you know, but we're going to start, guys, with a just distasteful, awful situation, and this is the Southport murders, and the guy who's now been found guilty of them. He'll be sentenced on Friday. Lauren, what have you got to say? Thursday, sorry.
I think, you know, there's been a lot of coverage of, oh, well, there's now not going to be a trial because he pled guilty, you know, and perhaps there would have been something more healing for large parts of the nation if there had been a trial. But pleading guilty,
the family that there's not going to be a trial.
Pleading guilty is, you know, the ultimate end victory here, really. This man is going to go to prison. He's going to go to prison presumably for quite a long time. And I think that it's very clear from, you know, the Lancashire child safety statement that's come out, the stuff from Lancashire Police, that this is somebody who has, I would suspect, severe mental health difficulties, not enough to have pled insanity. I don't even know if that's something you can plead in the United States. Perhaps that's just an Americanism that's it infected my brain after watching too much Special Victims Unit. But, you know, he's pled guilty rather than, you know, grounds of unreasonable inability to make decisions. But this is quite clearly someone who has been involved with the mental health services and systems previously, and I think what we need to be asking ourselves at this point is how those systems work, how those systems work with each other, the police, with the education system, with the mental health systems. Very clearly there is a breakdown in how the systems of the government work in those areas, and this is something that I've been on your show talking about before. I think one of the legacies of the last 30 years of government in this country is too much buck passing within every system of government, and this is yet another example of an abject failure in that area.
But his father, we believe that his father, the day before?
So the week before. At Salruda Cabana, called a taxi under a fake name, left his house with a knife, was going to the school that he had been expelled from, seemingly to try and attack them. His dad stopped his son, held up the taxi, and the son went back into the house.
Right, but
so they were aware of an attack a week earlier.
Right. So here's my question. Why don't you then just bring him to some sort of institution or safeguarding area or report him to the police or whatever it is? Why do you say, I know you were going to that school to knife some children, but you didn't do it, now be a good boy and go back to school?
Yeah, well, I don't know what his dad did. I assume he would have alerted somebody.
But I think Lauren's right. You know, there's a breakdown in communication between the various bodies, the various institutions who have accountability here. And I think accountability is the word. There seems to be a lack of accountability. Who is responsible? And I think that's what this inquiry that has been announced is going to look into, and it's really important that that happens and that it's comprehensive. The Prevent panel concluded that recently that he was not motivated by terrorist ideology. Now, I don't know the ins and outs of how that panel was coming to that determination.
Well, I mean, that's the point about prevent, is prevent exists in order to say, well, this person has an underlying ideology. They are an Islamist. They are someone who is, you know, of the extreme right wing. They are of an extremist temperament, and therefore they have to be sort of de-ideologicalized, almost in the way that we denazified Germany after the war. This is sort of the way that mechanism happens. If there's no underlying ideology at play, if there is just a fundamental break in what seems to be, you know, your grip on reality, that isn't actually something for prevent. Now, what the question becomes after that is, okay, well, who is that for then?
Exactly.
Is that for the mental health system? Is that for the education system? And that's what an inquiry really has to look at, is, okay, he was referred several times to prevent. He engaged with a youth. He fully engaged and completed with a youth justice referral. You know, he was engaging with an autism, an autism assessment, with an educational assessment. If all of those things are failing, then where is the break point in the system? And that's what an inquiry has to look at.
Your views, very welcome. Please do get in touch with us this morning and have your say. We will take a short break. We'll be back with the guys talking about more of the stories making the newspapers today, after we give you the European holiday destination weather and where the sun should be shining.
Ready to soak up that holiday sunshine?
Won't we need some cover?
No worries. All sorted.
All Clear Travel Insurance sponsors GB News Travel Destinations Forecast.
Some winter sunshine likely for the next couple of days in Sardinia and also Sicily, but some showers in Cyprus and some pretty wet conditions across the Canaries and Madeira for the next couple of days. The same weather system bringing soggy skies to Portugal also, and some wet weather across southern parts of France, some snow over the Alps. Showers in Cyprus, they'll still be there on Thursday, but they should be easing by Friday, and the rain in the Canaries will be easing by Friday as well, and temperatures over 20 degrees here.
All Clear Travel Insurance sponsors GB News Travel Destinations Forecast.
I'm Christopher Hope. From pop stars to politicians, I'll interview anybody in a pub who's got a political opinion. Join me every Friday on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, YouTube or gbnews.com, or wherever you get your podcasts. This is GB News, the People's Channel.
Patrick Christie's Tonight. Weekdays from 9 p.m.
5 years ago today, Harry and Meghan shocked the world when they announced that they were stepping back from royal life in what has since been dubbed Megxit. Many royal experts thought the future of the royal family was in doubt after the Duke and Duchess of Sussex's bombshell Oprah Winfrey interview, their scornful Netflix documentary, and Harry's autobiography Spare, that took aim at William and Catherine. Pleased to be joined now by entertainment and royal journalist Sarah Louise Robertson. Sarah, thank you very, very much. Great to have you on the show. So, Megxit, 5 years on, how's it gone for them?
It couldn't have gone any worse. I remember, as you pointed out there, Patrick, 5 years ago, one senior courtier called this move a declaration of war on the royal family. Well, this is a war that Meghan Markle and Prince Harry have lost. They are the losers in this whole sordid affair. And the royal family have come out stronger, more unified and better than ever. You know, she had it all in her hands to play with. It was all there to play with. She had the HRH title. She could have gone on to do wonderful things. And what's she now? A reality star. She's not even a working actress anymore. This new cookery show, Netflix have put it in the reality side of their categories. What a come down that is. We don't see them together in public anymore. She's doing her thing. She's going down the avenue of reality TV. And Harry's trying, I think, to do some of his charity work.
I still think that if he held his hands up and some things happened, that maybe the British public
He'd
would.
have to beg his brother. He'd have to beg his brother. The sticking point here is Prince William. Charles, yes, misses his son. I will say that again. He does.
GB News, the People's Channel.
Headliners on GB News 11 p.m. every night. It's got 3 top comedians going through the next day's newspapers so you don't have to read them, which is great.
That's a good point. He's lying. I mean, maybe he's not lying.
That's Headliners every night from 11 p.m. and 5 a.m. as well on GB News, Britain's news channel.
We're proud to be GB News, the People's Channel, and as you know, we always love to hear your views. Now, there's a new way of getting in touch with us at gbnews.com/your say. By commenting, you can be part of a live conversation and join our GB News community. You can even talk to me, Bev Turner, or any of the members of the GB News family.
Laura McKevitt and Andy Williams with stories that are getting everybody talking today and that are dominating the newspapers. And of course, Andy, we've got to reflect the inauguration of President Trump, making America great again, he says.
Yeah, I mean, in some ways, I don't think we learned anything new yesterday. His speech and the executive orders he signed were things he very clearly signposted for a long time. It was Trump at his most combative, at his most clear. He painted a picture of a country that was in complete decline. And obviously, he has all the answers also, he says. I think it's worth just pausing to reflect on how wide-ranging and how significant and extreme some of the things some of the executive orders he signed yesterday are, whether it's fossil fuels, whether it's gender, withdrawing from the Paris Climate Agreement, illegal immigration. He is just completely dismantling everything that Joe Biden did.
The interesting thing about this, he can dismantle them as president.
Yes.
And I reckon that's probably what he learned from his first term, that, the swamp, whatever, prevented him doing so much that he wanted to do. But the thing is, if it's not in law, it can be dismantled again by the next guy.
Which is exactly what happened last time. Biden undid a whole load of his executive orders as soon as he got in.
Paris Agreement.
But this time, there is a right-leaning Supreme Court. There is a right-leaning Congress on both fronts, and although it is a narrow margin, and we look at things like the executive order on birthright citizenship. Now, birthright citizenship in the United States is in the Constitution with the 14th Amendment. This executive order covers birthright citizenship specifically in relation to people born in the United States whose parents were illegally or undocumented in the United States. But it also covers people who were just temporarily in the United States when they had a baby. Now, that has actually already been litigated about 100 years ago in relation to the Constitution. So even with a right-leaning Supreme Court, it's entirely possible that that one gets struck down or struck back fairly quickly, because that one does seem to be one of the most egregious contraventions of constitutional precedent. So it's going to be really interesting to see how some of these executive orders engage with constitutional requirements in the United States, and how a right-leaning but constitutionally sound court deals with some of those sort of contradictions.
And there will be legal challenges.
Absolutely.
Aside from the politics of it all, we were looking at the social gatherings.
We were looking at the social gatherings.
Things like Barron Trump, his son, who's like 10 or something. But
18, yes.
He's
at university.
How old is he?
18.
And he's 9 foot tall.
He's
or
6
something.
foot 9.
It's wild.
Incredible.
Crazy like that,
Well, his mother is very, very tall.
Yeah. Now, I thought Melania looked incredible yesterday. I will say, I loved the hat. If you didn't catch it, the hat was incredible.
I mean, I'm not going to dispute that she looked great. I also think she looked like the Hamburglar. But
I thought Michael Jackson from the Smooth Criminal video.
Did you?
Yeah.
I thought she looked...
Or one of the villains from the Looney Tunes. From the Looney Tunes film.
I think the hat sets her apart.
Literally.
It doesn't make her really feel part of it all. There's a distance.
I think the hat would fit in a lot more in a British event. Things like the coronation and the royal weddings. A lot more people in Britain wear hats. And so if you look at those pictures of the inauguration, it's really only Ivanka Trump and Melania Trump who were wearing hats.
It is very British.
So that's why she looks, I think, quite outside of the processes, because it's not a common thing to be wearing hats at events like this in the United States.
There's a lady called Lauren Sanchez, and what we know, she is Jeff Bezos' fiancée, and what we know about her is she is wearing a bra.
Very publicly, in
She
fact.
was, yes.
Very publicly wearing a bra.
She was wearing a white lacy bra with a white blazer on top, so there were eyes on her.
She caught the attention of some of the male guests who were sitting
immediately.
adjacent to her.
Yeah, no, and I feel quite bad because it's eye-catching.
Yeah. Well, including Mark Zuckerberg, who was pictured looking down.
Well, and then there were pictures later on of Mark and his wife in a corner with a phone. So I imagine that he was in trouble later on.
Do you think, is that fashion or is that bang out of order, Ellie?
There's no place for it at the inauguration, no.
No, it's distasteful. I mean, in France we would say mal élevé. She's been badly brought up. You don't wear your underwear on the outside.
Don't wear your underwear on the outside.
No underwear on the outside.
Leave it to the imagination.
Yeah. High necks only.
Guys, again, let us know what you think. We'll be very, very receptive to that. And it was such a gathering. There were some really strange collaborations in there. We'll talk about that as the day goes on. We say goodbye to these two. They're back in about 45 minutes' time. Here's the weather.
Despite the morning rain, it'll be a nice, warm, cosy day ahead. Boxed heat pumps, sponsors of weather on GB News.
Morning. Yes, it's time for your latest weather update from the Met Office here on GB News. There's a few dense patches of fog around this morning. For most, it's another fairly drab day, but we should see some sunny spells across parts of Scotland and Northern Ireland. Dull and damp over the far northwest of Wales and parts of northwest England. Rain and drizzle at times getting into northeast England too. Elsewhere, many places will stay dry. A few showers creeping into western parts of Scotland. Some patchy rain and drizzle for a time over eastern Scotland, but we should see some brightness across northern Scotland, a good chunk of Northern Ireland seeing some sunny spells. England and Wales staying quite misty and murky, may brighten up a little bit, but overall dull and pretty chilly with temperatures in most places not getting above 6 or 7 Celsius. The winds are fairly light, and that will allow, again, things to turn quite misty and murky through this evening, and overnight some fog patches will thicken up. Still some rain and drizzle over the Pennines through parts of Yorkshire and at times around the coast of northwest Wales. Much of Northern Ireland, central and eastern Scotland like to have clear skies this evening. A hint of blue on the chart. Temperatures will quickly here dip down below freezing where we have clear skies, but in western Scotland we'll continue to see quite a lot of cloud, a bit of a breeze blowing in a few showers here, which could turn heavy as we head into Wednesday. A bit more patchy rain developing across the south as well. That's going to lead to a fairly damp start to tomorrow morning here, and still, as I said, some mist and fog around. Where we've got clear skies, we will see those temperatures dipping down below freezing, maybe -1 or -2. Most places just about staying above freezing, but still a pretty cold start to Wednesday. Cold and damp too across East Anglia and the southeast of England. Rain on and off for much of the day here tomorrow. A drier, brighter day for northwest England and North Wales. Some sunny spells here, quite breezy at times in western Scotland with a few showers, but elsewhere we should see some sunny spells. Staying on the chilly side, however, things may well turn pretty wet and windy at the end of the week.
There will be a light breeze in the morning, leading to a warm front. Boxed heat pumps, sponsors of weather on GB News.
The latest GB News travel.
Good morning, I'm Russell Holding. Across the Norfolk-Suffolk border, the A143 is closed each way between Harleston and Bungay after an accident late last night. There's disruption to flights at Luton Airport because of fog. In Oxfordshire, the A40 is closed each way for an investigation. Eastbound's closed from the Cutslow roundabout to Headington. Westbound's closed from Headington to Marston. The M25 in Essex is partly blocked anti-clockwise, half a mile before junction 29 for the A127. Queues halfway back to junction 30 for the A13. In London, the A315 is blocked eastbound by an accident on the High Street in Hounslow. On the M26 in Kent, there are westbound queues towards the M25 because of roadworks. Gatwick Express train services have been stopped between Gatwick Airport and Brighton because of a signalling problem and track fault, with Southern and Thameslink reporting delays of up to 3/4 of an hour. And train services in Hampshire are suspended between Brockenhurst and Lymington Pier because of a shortage of staff. That's the latest.
You can stay up to date throughout the day by visiting our website, gbnews.com.
Imagine how £50,000 in cash from us could make your new year go with a bang.
Hi, my name's Victoria. I won the Spring Great British giveaway. So the day we got the money in our bank account, everything just felt a lot lighter. I would say if you're thinking about entering, just enter.
For another chance to win, text cash to 63232. One entry costs £2 plus one standard network rate message. Or text bonus to 63232. 5 entries cost £5 plus one standard network rate message. Go to gbnews.com/win. Entries start from just £2. You can call 0903 681 3232. Calls cost £2 plus your network access charge. Or post your name and number to GB10 PO Box 8690 Derby DE1 9TT. UK only. Entrance must be 18 or over. Lines close at 6 p.m. on the 31st of January. Please check the closing time if listening or watching on demand. Good luck.
In the GB Newsroom, we bring you the news as it happens.
With our team of dedicated journalists across the UK, we're ready to keep you up to date with what's happening every half an hour, every single day. Bulletins here on GB News, the People's Channel,
Britain's news channel.
If you want your news to be straight talking...
This is a nightmare for the Conservatives again.
Down to earth.
It's not just Nottingham where this is happening, is it?
And most importantly, honest.
Hard-working, middle-class taxpayers, they'll get their book thrown at them.
Then catch me, Martin Daubney, Monday to Friday, 3 till 6 p.m. on GB News, Britain's news channel.
Join me, Nana Akwe, for an informative, interactive news programme with a difference. It's fun.
No, he didn't say that, Dave.
I'm so surprised.
I think there's an element of truth to that.
Join me from 3 p.m. every weekend, only on GB News, Britain's news channel.
Good morning. The face of evil. The Southport attacker was referred 3 times to the anti-terrorism programme Prevent. Why was nothing done to stop him?
The Prime Minister will make a live address 8:30 this morning after being accused of a cover-up over all of this.
The Home Secretary Yvette Cooper announces a public inquiry into the Southport stabbings.
And you're witnessing the dawn of the golden age of America. That's what it's going to be. We're bringing it back. We're going to bring it back fast.
Well, will it be a new American golden age? Donald Trump sworn in as the 47th President of the United States as he gets straight to work signing executive orders. He pardons January the 6th rioters. Supporters celebrate in Washington.
GB News can reveal that one of the grooming gang abusers was involved in attempts to convert a property into a children's care home in Leeds.
Prince Harry will be in the High Court today. The Duke of Sussex will file his claims against the Sun newspaper.
As it's revealed, nearly 40% of UK drivers experienced road rage last year. We're asking, should excessive anger behind the wheel be illegal?
And in sport, Chelsea moved back into the top 4 after beating Wolves 3-1 last night. Aston Villa and Liverpool play their penultimate Champions League group games tonight. And Coco Gauff is out of the Australian Open as Djokovic and Alcaraz play later.
There's a few dense fog patches around this morning. For many, it'll just be another fairly grey and chilly day, but a few places will see a little bit of blue sky. Join me later to find out where.
Hello there, very good morning to you on this Tuesday morning. You're waking up to me, Eamonn Holmes.
And I'm Ellie Costello, and this is GB News Breakfast.
Earlier on, we were talking about items which are essential that you can't live without in the kitchen. I came up with a toaster.
Yeah, you said a toaster, which was, I thought, a bit rogue, but I see it.
Why is that rogue?
I
think that's
all
fair.
things in the kitchen, the toaster.
Do you not like toast?
I love toast, but it wouldn't be the number one thing that I reach for in the morning.
What would you do without a toaster, though?
Grill it, or eat it just as plain bread.
Oh.
But anyway, it's got you all talking this morning. It's a story in the papers this morning. Gen Z apparently can't survive without their coffee machines. That would be their number one appliance. Philip's been in touch saying my very important piece of equipment is the microwave. Gruff chap says the cooker, the washing machine, the dishwasher, the tumble dryer and the fridge in that order.
Yeah, but you just got to choose one.
Yeah.
Out of all those things.
Darren says a kettle or the coffee machine. Again, you've got to choose one. And Bet says my Kenwood.
My Kenwood? Is that the...
Is that a blender?
Yeah, that's a... Yeah.
Kenwood Chef.
Yeah, Kenwood Chef.
Yeah.
All right, OK.
You see, I'm old enough to remember when fridges weren't really part of the kitchen. You know,
Really? Where would you have your fridge?
You didn't have... I'm just saying, I'm old enough to remember in the 60s...
They weren't called fridges, they were called outdoors.
People were... Yeah, exactly. People didn't have a fridge as standard in their kitchen.
So how would you...
What are you looking at me? Do you think fridges were in existence from the 1920s or something?
No, but I thought maybe before your time.
When do you think fridges were invented or were part and parcel of the...
50s?
No, 70s.
Really?
They didn't really become part of everybody's day-to-day living until the 70s.
Fridges have been around for longer than that, sure.
All right,
really?
my friend, all right. You tell me who had a fridge in the 60s.
Well, I'll tell you, the Beatles had a fridge at this time.
I bet they did.
Well, I'm old enough to
JFK had a
that.
famous fridge, yeah.
And when it became a good thing. So it would be very hard to now be without a fridge, but I would sort of know how to do it. I mean, Paul said outdoors, you're right, you used to store things like drinks and things outside.
Right, yeah.
What did you do with your meats?
Eh?
Just buy them on the day and then cook them on the day?
I don't know, I was 6. What do I know? I wasn't cooking or buying
Oh, Ellie,
anything.
back in the day, you had to catch the cow before you used to...
Okay, wait a minute. Am I talking nonsense here, folks?
I think you might be, yes. Yes is the answer.
I say to you, do you remember life without a fridge?
And they were
when
gonna
did a
say no.
fridge come into your life? In my situation, I remember it must have been 1966, 67, 68, something like that. We got a fridge, and it was a gas fridge, actually.
Right.
Can you imagine?
I'm
You used to have to light a pilot light in the fridge.
In the fridge?
Yeah.
And was this was like a little...
No, it was up to your waist. It was a fridge.
Because then in the 70s, when freezers took over, everybody had those great big...
Oh, now we're getting somewhere.
Those
chest freezer.
Chest freezers.
I've got one of those in the garage, it's great.
Everybody should have one in their garage. Open it up, put all the stuff in. Do people still have have
I
those
bought
now?
one the other day just as an additional extra.
All right. So you couldn't live without what?
I think the coffee machine for me. Yeah, it's a recent thing, but I need the coffee.
It's kettle for me, can't be without the tea. But apparently for the nation, it's actually the washing machine, as in clothing washing machine.
Clothing washing machine.
Yeah, can't live without it.
But do you necessarily see that as part of your kitchen?
I think most people would have their washing machine in their kitchen, unless you're posh and you've got a laundry room.
Okay.
Which you probably do.
Of course you have a laundry room.
Of course you have a laundry room.
And the person that works in it as well.
The person that works in it. That's the secret. Right, thank you very much
Anyway, let
indeed.
us
Keep that
know.
coming in. 6 minutes past the hour of 7 o'clock. A very good morning to you.
And our top story this morning, the government has announced an inquiry into how the state failed to identify the risk posed by the Southport killer.
Axel Rudakabana pleaded guilty to murdering 3 girls in July after being referred 3 times to an anti-extremism programme. It was called Prevent, and that was amid concerns over his fixation with violence. Look at that evil face. Look at that.
Well, the Home Secretary, Yvette Cooper, said the country needs independent answers on Prevent, while the Prime Minister described the 18-year-old as vile and sick.
Well, Yvette Cooper added that there were grave questions to answer on how the state failed to protect those 3 little girls. And the Prime Minister, we should tell you, will make a statement on what happened in Southport from Downing Street at 8:30 this morning, and we will cover that live.
Well, we're joined now by Deputy Editor at Spite, Fraser Myers. Good to see you, Fraser.
Good morning.
And when you look into the details of this, there were so many opportunities to stop this man. Why was he not stopped?
I mean, how many times have we heard that chilling phrase, known to the authorities? This looks like to be an absolutely catastrophic failure. This was someone who was referred to the Prevent Counter-Extremism scheme 3 times, judged apparently either not a risk or not their risk that they wanted to deal with. He's someone who was known to have who's been in and out of mental health services. He's someone who was expelled from school for violently attacking a fellow pupil. Someone who is known to have a very strange and bizarre obsession with violence. He was obsessed with genocide. He was obsessed with various killers and brutal dictators from the past. He was obsessed with school shootings. Again, this seems like the exact kind of profile of someone who the authorities should be keeping tabs on, and this just tragedy seems like it ought to have been preventable. But for whatever reason, whether it's Prevent itself or various other state authorities were not talking to each other, this has been allowed to happen, and it's unacceptable.
Fraser, does this leave just an emptiness for the parents of these 3 murdered little girls? The fact that he pleaded guilty at the last minute, and for the trial, that means you don't go through 6 or 8 weeks of a trial and details are given in court. If I was one of the parents, I would feel empty at that.
Would you?
I think, well, it depends. Some people will feel relief that they don't have to relive the entire experience. Yeah. They will now get to give their victim impact statements on Thursday at the sentencing, and that will play a role in the sentencing. But it does mean that there are certain questions that will be left unanswered. It probably means that we won't really get to the bottom of his actual motive here, because any inquiry separate to the court process will be about the state failures rather than Axel Rudikabana himself. So, yes, I agree there will be the parents and those connected to the victims will feel perhaps that there will be information that they deserve to have that won't come to light. But on the other hand, I could also see why many would want to avoid sort of the traumatising aspect of going through the court case, and of him, if he was pleading not guilty, of him denying that he committed this terrible crime. That too would be pretty, would feel terrible.
Thank you, Fraser. We've got to ask you today in our poll of the day, do you trust a public inquiry to get to the truth as to what happened in Southport by this, I was going to say man, what is he, what would you call him? Is he a child?
A monster,
yeah.
That's what you'd call him. Well, we're bringing you the live results throughout the day, so make sure you stay tuned. The final result, as always, will be announced later in Martin Daubney's show. If you'd like to get involved, just scan the QR code on your screens now or go to gbnews.com/poll.
Let's turn to yesterday's event in the USA, and a golden age of America has begun. That's what Donald Trump said yesterday. He was sworn in yesterday afternoon.
Well, almost straight away, he was signing off on a raft of executive orders, including some to reverse the actions of the now former President Biden.
Our reporter Jack Carson looks back at what turned out to be an historic day.
So help me God. Congratulations, Mr. President.
In an historic inauguration, Donald Trump was sworn in as the 47th President of the United States. With extremely cold temperatures in Washington, the ceremony was moved indoors for the first time since Ronald Reagan's second inauguration in 1985. As dawn broke in D.C., security kept a watchful eye. The day began with Donald Trump attending a church service before meeting the Bidens, presenting to the world the peaceful transition of power. Thousands of Trump supporters queued for hours to be able to watch the ceremony from inside the Capital One arena.
Oh, I'm thrilled to death to be here. I'm just so happy that this day has come.
It's a really, really hard economy that we're living in right now, and I can't take it anymore. I'm so happy that Trump won.
Feel energetic. I'm so excited. I'm so happy for this.
As the guests arrived for the ceremony in the Capitol building's rotunda, members of Congress gathered with political and business leaders from across the globe. It wasn't long before former presidents took their seats, with one noticeable absence being former First Lady Michelle Obama.
The President-elect of the United States, the Honorable Donald John Trump.
A rapturous applause for the president-elect and a beaming smile on the face of the man whose policies over the next 4 years will shape the future of the world. Now Vice President Vance was the first to take his oath.
So help me God. So help me God. Congratulations, Mr. Vice President.
Then the moment for America's returning president arrived as Donald Trump took his oath of office from Chief Justice Roberts.
I, Donald John Trump, do solemnly swear. I, Donald John Trump, do solemnly swear. That I will faithfully execute. That I will faithfully execute. The office of President of the United States. The office of President of the United States.
And as the new president hugged his family, a gun salute to the Commander-in-Chief. In his inaugural address, President Trump hailed the beginning of a golden age.
During every single day of the Trump administration, I will very simply put America first.
Speaking to America, there was one clear message.
We are one people, one family, and one glorious nation under God, So to every parent who dreams for their child and every child who dreams for their future, I am with you, I will fight for you, and I will win for you. We are going to win like never before.
In a speech full of policy announcements, Trump declared a national emergency at the southern border, pledged to make the USA an energy superpower, and said he wanted to be known as a peacemaker. As the world watches on, the new president is getting straight to work.
The first item that President Trump is signing is the rescission of 78 Biden-era executive actions, executive orders, presidential memoranda, and others.
So this is January 6th. These are the hostages. Approximately 1,500 for a pardon.
Yes.
Full pardon.
Well, joining us now in the studio is spokesperson for Republican Overseas UK, Jennifer Ewing. Good to see you, Jennifer.
Thanks for having me.
And the morning after the night before, how are you feeling? Trump 2.0.
Actually, you know, not to correct you, but I don't even think this is going to be Trump 2.0. I think it's going to be completely different. I think, one, he's a different man. What he's experienced both in almost being assassinated, twice, and indeed the 4 years in which he stood back and watched and learned from some of the mistakes he had made in the previous administration. The biggest thing we're going to see are the people he's surrounding himself, of course. Last time, I think in 2016, he'll be the first to admit he wasn't expecting to win. So he took advice from a lot of Washington insiders, perhaps put the wrong people around him. This time, he's got his own collection of people. A lot of them are very different viewpoints. A few former Democrats in there, whether it's Tulsi Gabbard, Bobby Kennedy Jr., real Washington outsiders, a much more populist sort of cabinet and group team.
But you've only got him for 4 years. Are they grooming a successor? Are they looking towards someone who's going to carry on what he wants to do?
Sure, and I think it's the latter. It's too early to say who a successor will be. The obvious choice would be Vice President J.D. Vance, if he's successful and does well. However, this is more than just the man himself, Trump. You know, this is a real movement. You saw that this time he built a much broader coalition of people. It wasn't just the, the white working class or whatever. He increased in women, in black men, historical Hispanic numbers, and of course, maybe, as he says, thanks to his son Barron, but the younger voters, the 18 to 29, really voted for him. And I think a lot of that was one of the comments he said last night was, perhaps the best wars are the wars we're not involved with. That really resonated, as did some of the other Bobby Kennedy Jr. Policies of looking into the food, looking into the pharmaceutical drugs.
Yes,
I was just home in California for a few weeks over Christmas, and the amount of people starting to talk about this, like, wow, even if you're a wealthy person with access to organic food and farmers market, it's still crazy. So I think there's a lot of new, exciting things. Obviously, the economy was the #1 issue people voted on, and #2 was securing the southern border.
You do seem excited, Jennifer.
Oh, well, and I'm not a morning person, and yesterday was long, so yes, I am.
Well, Trump hit the ground running yesterday, didn't he? He signed over 200 executive orders, many of them you've just mentioned there, but pardoning those involved in the 6th of January riots. What did you make of that?
Yeah, I think that's probably just. I think that's probably the right thing to do. Keeping in mind, Biden also gave a pardon for the J6 committee, which is, do what you will with that. They hadn't been charged with anything. So there's something behind the scenes there. But a lot of these people, many of them did break the law, absolutely. And they've served real prison time. Right now, I believe there's an issue going on in D.C. where they're having trouble getting some of them released. But yeah, let's move on from January 6th. And it's probably right that they were pardoned, most of them.
Okay. Thank you very much, Jennifer.
Thanks for having me.
Not at all. We appreciate you coming in after such a big night in terms of all of that. Thank you very much indeed, Jennifer. Thank you.
I think it's right, though, what Jennifer was saying, though, about it being totally different. Do you get that sense? It's 2016.
Well, I think he's learned. I think Jennifer pointed out he has learned a lot. I think it's very, very interesting that he was able to have those 4 years on the sidelines, watching and thinking.
Probably learned a lot there as well.
I'm not going to do it like that anymore, or what? How the heck is this happening? So we sat down yesterday, and there he just was, you know,
he was
signing off all those orders, prepared.
He came in, hit the ground running.
Yeah. What do you think? And what do you think the new, you know, President Trump back in office again? How will that affect the United Kingdom? Will it affect the United Kingdom? And does it inspire you? Because I think in this country, I think there is a possibility that people will look and say, well, look, there's a guy that gets things done. We don't have people that will just get things done, will rise above it all and say, I'm going to do this and be inspirational for the country. I think that's the whole thing. I think we don't need people who are all this infighting at Westminster. They need somebody to lead the country and be inspirational, who you would follow. Has it changed your mind? Has it, you know, what way would you vote this time around? Inspired you? Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, let us know what you think. gbnews.com/yours say.
Do you think the weather will be inspiring today?
Well, I hope so, because it was really foggy this morning coming in, wasn't it?
Yeah, I don't think it'll be inspiring. Anyway, Alex Deakin, what's the score?
A chilly start will give way to a lovely, warm afternoon. Boxed heat pumps, sponsors of weather on GB News.
Morning. Yes, it's time for your latest weather update from the Met Office here on GB News. There's a few dense patches of fog around this morning. For most, it's another fairly drab day, but we should see some sunny spells across parts of Scotland and Northern Ireland. Dull and damp over the far northwest of Wales and parts of northwest England. Rain and drizzle at times getting into northeast England too. Elsewhere, many places will stay dry. A few showers creeping into western parts of Scotland. Some patchy rain and drizzle for a time over eastern Scotland, but we should see some brightness across northern Scotland, a good chunk of Northern Ireland seeing some sunny spells. England and Wales staying quite misty and murky, may brighten up a little bit, but overall dull and pretty chilly, with temperatures in most places not getting above 6 or 7 Celsius. The winds are fairly light, and that will allow, again, things to turn quite misty and murky through this evening, and overnight some fog patches will thicken up. Still some rain and drizzle over the Pennines through parts of Yorkshire and at times around the coast of northwest Wales. Much of Northern Ireland, central and eastern Scotland like to have clear skies this evening. A hint of blue on the chart. Temperatures will quickly here dip down below freezing where we have clear skies, but in western Scotland we'll continue to see quite a lot of cloud, a bit of a breeze blowing in, a few showers here, which could turn heavy as we head into Wednesday. A bit more patchy rain developing across the south as well. That's going to lead to a fairly damp start to tomorrow morning here, and still, as I said, some mist and fog around. Where we've got clear skies, we will see those temperatures dipping down below freezing, maybe -1 or -2. Most places just about staying above freezing, but still a pretty cold start to Wednesday. Cold and damp too across East Anglia and the southeast of England. Rain on and off for much of the day here tomorrow. A drier, brighter day for northwest England and North Wales. Some sunny spells here, quite breezy at times in western Scotland with a few showers, but elsewhere we should see some sunny spells. Staying on the chilly side, however, things may well turn pretty wet and windy at the end of the week.
A nice bright morning will generate a lovely warm day, right through to the evening. Boxed Solar, sponsors of weather on GB News.
Oh, goodness me, I've got you going today. We talked about, Miss Ellie here believes that fridges were in existence from 1845 or so.
The 1950s is what I said, yeah.
Yeah.
You're saying the 1960s.
But I'm saying we didn't have one till mid or late 60s. And Eileen, good morning, Eileen. Eileen said, I didn't have a fridge until 1970. We used to buy our food daily. Milk was kept in a bucket of cold water. My grandparents had a larder with a cold stone in it to keep food fresh. So Eamonn was right.
Well, he likes to hear that, don't you?
Eamonn was right. I'm with Eamonn. Eamonn was okay.
Trevor said, you're not talking nonsense, Eamonn. My mum had a pantry and everything went in there. Meat, then mum would look at it. If it smelt okay, it was okay.
Well, that's basically true.
Yeah?
I can remember the first time, the biggest novelty when we had a fridge, when we got a fridge, was to make...
Trifle.
No, orange juice ice cubes. Orange cordial ice cubes.
Oh, you love orange. Yeah, look, he loves orange cordial.
But that was what you could do. It was like almost make lollipops.
All these fun things you could do with the fridge.
Now today, 50 grand would probably not buy you a fridge, but anyway, it could be yours if you enter the Great British Giveaway.
Imagine how £50,000 in cash from us could make your new year go with a bang.
Hi, my name's Victoria. I won the Spring Great British Giveaway. So the day we got the money in our bank account, everything just felt a lot lighter. I would say if you're thinking about entering, just enter.
For another chance to win £50,000 cash, text cash to 63232. One entry costs £2 plus one standard network rate message. Or text bonus to 63232. 5 entries cost £5 plus one standard network rate message. Go to gbnews.com/win. Entries start from just £2. You can call 0903 681 3232. Calls cost £2 plus your network access charge. Or post your name and number to GB10 PO Box 8690 Derby DE1 9TT. UK only. Entrants must be 18 or over. Lines close at 6 p.m. on the 31st of January. Please check the closing time if listening or watching on demand. Good luck.
Just looking at these exact figures for fridges. The year I was born, 1959, only 13% of people in the whole of the UK, 13%, that's just, just more than 1 in 10, had a fridge.
Yeah, so very wealthy people would have had a fridge, yeah.
And then that rose to 58% by the 1970.
Wow.
By 1970, 58%.
So I wonder at what point everybody had a fridge in their house.
Oh, I tell you, you're talking about by the end of the 70s or into the 80s.
Do you think? Apparently even now, only 97% of homes have a fridge. I'm
There
fascinated. Anyway, keep your views coming
Whereas
in on
it's interesting
fridges.
You see it as, well, you can't really have a kitchen without a fridge.
Of course.
Yeah, but you can.
But you can, apparently.
That was it.
GBnews.com/you'll say keep them coming in.
And how did you keep your food fresh, and how did you know it was on or off or whatever? Let us know. Still to come this morning, nearly 40% of drivers admit to experiencing road rage in the past year. Now, this amazes me. We're asking the question today, is it time to make it illegal? I thought it was illegal.
Yeah. Do you get road rage?
No, I don't. No, I don't at all. But I do get quite worried at the amount of people who do.
Yes, it scares me.
And I watch people shouting at other people and saying, what's all that about? We'll answer that right after this.
Sunday with Michael Portillo from 11, only on GB News.
Estelle, welcome to the show.
Thank you.
This was thought to be a Ruskin. Ruskin was a very considerable polymath, an artist as well as many other things. So, do you know why it was submitted for reappraisal? Was there a bit of a suspicion that it had been misidentified?
No, as you say, it's a service that Christie's offer. You can submit an artwork that you have, so anyone can submit it and request an estimate. And then the auction house's appraisal service allows you space as well to describe it and ask for evaluation. And Christie's sort of looked at it behind the sheet of dirty old glass and recognised a sort of Turner-esque mood and feel and ambience about it. And because there was this close relationship between Ruskin and Turner, which is fascinating, we'll come on to that shortly, but they sort of felt, well, the brushstrokes are very strong, the line is very economic, and the colour of the palette seems to be rather Turner-esque. And then they called in a specialist paper historian who confirmed that actually the paper that was used was one that Turner favoured himself. So yes, it was originally considered to be by Ruskin, but then we discovered something more magnificent. And don't forget, what's really interesting, now it's for sale. The lucky buyer is not just buying a picture. The lucky buyer is buying a life story, a relationship that actually changed the course of art history because of the relationship between Ruskin and Turner themselves.
GB News, the People's Channel.
Hi, I'm Michelle Dewberry, and my show is your opportunity to cut through all the noise and dive in headfirst to some robust debates. Ideas clash.
Situation, isn't it?
Because
the failure is
you're
the failure is
deliberately avoiding my point. Nothing's held back,
And if you think this is the end of it, wait for more.
and we do not shy away from the difficult stuff.
Sometimes I want to shake people and say, if only you understood.
So join me on Jubes and Co weeknights at 6 p.m. only on GB News, Britain's news channel.
We're proud to be GB News, the People's Channel, and as you know, we always love to hear your views. Now, there's a new way of getting in touch with us at gbnews.com/yoursay. By commenting, you can be part of a live conversation and join our GB News community. You can even talk to me, Bev Turner, or any of the members of the GB News family.
I'm Michael Portillo. This is GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Some breaking news in the past half hour. The rate of UK unemployment rose to 4.4% in the 3 months to November. That's up from 4.3%.
Well, that's nothing. That's nothing.
Office for National Statistics.
Hardly worth mentioning.
It is basically flat.
Road rage, 40% of you have admitted to experiencing it in the past year. It can cause aggressive behaviour, abrupt braking, rapid acceleration, sharp manoeuvres. What can I say? It can be a disaster. And with this in mind, we're asking whether it should be made illegal. We're now joined by motoring journalist Amanda Stretton, who believes it should, and free speech advocate Frank Ferretti, who believes road rage shouldn't be made illegally. Hiya, both of you. Amanda, I see what just amazes me is why it isn't illegal already. I would have thought it would have had to be.
Yeah.
I think the problem is understanding sort of at what point just getting annoyed with another driver and flashing your lights actually turns into some kind of abuse. Now, I think it's all fair that because the roads are packed and there's very little space for people get frustrated with other people's driving. That I haven't got a problem with. I think when it starts turning into abuse and dangerous activities, that is when we really need to start addressing it, and people need to take responsibility for their actions.
Yeah. You think those actions, though, are understandable, Frank, yeah?
Not understandable, but, we always had aggressive, uncivilized behavior. And it seems to me that if all we always do is make laws and argue that it should be illegal, then we miss the fact that it is not really possible to regulate such kind of behavior. And we already have laws against dangerous driving. If somebody causes an accident, if somebody sort of creates problems for other people, there are already ways of policing that and making them responsible for their action. And what I really worry about is that we have yet one more law, which, for example, we already have a law about not talking.
No, I don't agree with you, Frank. I don't agree with you, Frank. I think people should know what is proper behaviour, and if you are overly aggressive, or you get out of your car and you walk up to Amanda in another car and you're blaring and shouting in her face, I think there's got to be a charge for that, that you have aggressive behaviour or whatever it's going to be called. But I think it's obvious to see it, and I think people should know. People do know what's acceptable and what's not acceptable.
They certainly do, and we have very clear rules and laws in our world. We have customs, and people know that so and so has behaved abusively. But that's different than basically criminalizing that behaviour. Because there's a very fine line between somebody losing their cool and somebody actually doing harm. And it seems to me that what we should be concerned with is harm, the causing of harm.
Yeah.
Well, do you know, Amanda, I think, we talk about codes. And there should be a code of behaviour for boarding an aeroplane, for sitting on an aeroplane, for driving on the roads. I mean, we're not all stupid. We do know what that code of behaviour should be, basically.
I entirely agree, and I take issue with what Frank said for the simple reason that I had a particularly unpleasant experience where a driver pulled out in front of me without looking. I could see them coming from the right, knew that they were going to make this move, and I gave him a toot to say, hey, look where you're going.
Yeah.
This man got out of his car, came to my car, was smashing my window, broke my windscreen. I had my small child in the car at the time. Nobody did anything about it. And when I reported it to the police, even though I know that there is plenty of cameras on this particular roundabout, nobody did anything about it. And this is the problem. Nobody stepped up to help, despite it being a busy morning.
Yeah.
And this is the problem. People don't seem to understand where that line is between what's acceptable and what isn't. Tooting someone because they made a silly move is acceptable. Getting out and smashing somebody's windscreen isn't.
Yeah, during the summer, it was really, really hot, and I was sitting in my car, and I had the air conditioning on, and to have the air conditioning on, you have to have the engine on. Well, this guy made it his business to cross the road, come over to my car, and ask me why I had my engine on. And of course, stupidly, I'm thinking of answering. I put the window down, and I said, sorry. And I said, do you feel how warm it is? I need my aircon on. And he absolutely, and I put my window up, and like you, he thumped my window and banged my window and whatever. And there are these people who just get angry about nothing. I think, what difference does it make to you whether my engine is on or not? Shut up, go away. But then maybe I'm becoming full of road rage.
Well, no, it's threatening behaviour, isn't it? And as Amanda says, at the moment, you don't have the protections if you're subjected to that. Anyway, you two are out of time, I'm afraid. Amanda and Frank, thank you so much for your time this morning. Let us know what you think at home as well, gbnews.com.
Thank you. We'll hit the break, and we've got Chris Philp, the Shadow Home Secretary, right after this.
The latest GB News travel.
Good morning, I'm Russell Holding. Trains have been stopped between Northallerton and Middlesbrough because of a shortage of staff. Across the Norfolk-Suffolk border, the A143 is closed each way between Harleston and Bungay after an accident late last night. There's disruption to flights at London City Airport because of fog. On the M1 in Bedfordshire, 2 out of 4 lanes are closed southbound at junction 11A for the A5 north of Dunstable, where a coach has broken down, causing delays. In Oxfordshire, the A40 is closed each way for an investigation, eastbound from the Cutslow roundabout to Headington and westbound from Headington to Marston. On the M25 in Essex, 2 out of 4 lanes are closed anti-clockwise, half a mile before junction 29 for the A127 after an accident, with queues from junction 30 for the A13. Gatwick Express train services are suspended between Gatwick Airport and Brighton because of a signalling problem and track fault, and train services in Hampshire are suspended between Brockenhurst and Lymington Pier because of a shortage of staff.
You can stay up to date throughout the day by visiting our website, gbnews.com.
Good Afternoon Britain isn't just about us. The wonderful thing about this programme is it's about everyone watching. It's an interactive programme.
Well, there absolutely is something to see here, and we're going to be talking about it more. Whether it's breaking royal news, Will, please bring us up to date, or indeed a particularly punchy speech in the House of Commons.
Very, very curious.
We bring it to you live, and then we bring you live reaction as well.
That's Good Afternoon Britain, weekdays from midday.
Only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Hi, I'm Michelle Dewberry, and my show is your opportunity to cut through all the noise and dive in headfirst to some robust debates. Ideas clash.
Situation,
No,
Because the failure is...
You're deliberately avoiding my point. Nothing's held back.
And if you think this is the end of it, wait for more.
And we do not shy away from the difficult stuff. Sometimes I want to shake people and say, if only you understood. So join me on Jubes & Co. weeknights at 6 p.m, only on GB News, Britain's news channel.
Join me, Camilla Tominey, for a frank and honest discussion with those in power that cuts through the spin and gets to the heart of the issues shaping our nation.
You haven't confirmed that you want to stand as leader, but you haven't ruled it out either.
This report basically says that he's not fit to stand trial. Is he indecisive? Incompetent?
I deliver the dose of reality Westminster needs. That's the Camilla Tominey Show at 9:30 every Sunday on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
It's Patrick Christie's Tonight, and here we do things differently. It's explaining the absolute madness of this, doesn't it? It's explosive. I mean, this is very good. It's lively.
850. Your government sat there, Sean, and it did nothing.
It's controversial.
And the Middle East has been in turmoil since before I was born.
It's everything you need to kickstart your evening.
Everyone's had their Weetabix tonight. I love to see it.
That's Patrick Christie's Tonight, weeknights from 9 p.m. Only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Welcome back to Breakfast. We're joined now by Shadow Home Secretary Chris Philp. Good to see you this morning, Mr. Philp. Can we start by asking you about Axel Ruda-Cabana? Obviously, that news out yesterday, pleaded guilty to 16 charges, murder of those 3 little girls in Southport, the attempted murder of several others, and terror charges as well. We also found out he was referred to Prevent 3 times under your government. How did Prevent fail to stop this man?
Well, I think we need to look into that through the public inquiry that was announced yesterday. We support that inquiry, and that is the kind of question it needs to get to the bottom of. I think the inquiry also needs to look at the government's handling of the aftermath of these terrible murders, when it appears to me they knew information, for example, about the Prevent referrals, which they did not share with the public, apparently on CPS advice. So we need to look at whether that was the right thing to do. And the government have questions to answer about what they knew and when, why they didn't disclose that information. We saw some terrible, terrible riots. There were no excuse for those riots, but the inquiry needs to look at whether the government's failure to disclose information made that situation worse or not. Jonathan Hall, the independent reviewer of anti-terrorism legislation, has raised concerns, he raised them last October, that where the government fails to provide full information, it creates a void which is filled by often uninformed speculation on social media. Jonathan Hall, who's a KC, an expert lawyer, has said there is a lot the government can say in those circumstances without prejudicing a trial. So the inquiry needs to look at why the government was not more open and transparent. We need to know what they knew and when, why that wasn't shared. So the inquiry needs to cover that,
Chris,
as well as looking at those potential failures before
Chris,
the appalling
you're
murders.
talking about what the government knew and what they should have said, whatever, and I believe that would have prevented a lot of disturbances that there were on the streets at the time as to how you do that. So you're saying to me, when the Home Secretary turned up to lay flowers, when the Prime Minister was there, they knew quite a lot at that particular time, which they did not reveal?
Well, I think they need to tell us exactly what they did know and when they knew it. And if they knew things like the referral to Prevent, for example, which they didn't communicate, they need to explain why that was. Now, they've referred in a statement yesterday to CPS advice. So we need to understand what that advice said, why the advice said what it did. Could the government have overruled it? And as I say, Jonathan Hall, who's the independent reviewer of terrorism legislation, said last October that it does serve the public interest to be open and for the government to be open and transparent.
The difficult thing from your point of view, Chris, is if you had have been in power, could you have done anything differently? I mean, that is the question. It's one thing to criticise the present government, but would you have done anything differently?
Well, potentially, and we need the inquiry to cover this question, what the government knew and when, why it wasn't disclosed. Did that have any consequences? Did it allow misinformation to spread that then led to the riots? You know, we need to answer those questions, and that's why it's so important.
Okay. Well, it's a question, isn't it, about...
covers that, as well as the lead up to the terrible atrocity.
Well, it is a question about our contempt of court rules, isn't it? Because they've obviously been designed for an age before social media, before the internet, where you would have very strict reporting restrictions. Those journalists that were allowed into a courtroom would know what they could and couldn't say. But we are now in a world where we see these horrific events take place, and we have the internet, where if there is this gap between these horrific events and information coming out, then misinformation can spread, and that's what leads to the riots that we saw this summer. So surely contempt of court rules need to be looked at.
Well, I think that is the point you're making is very similar to the point that Jonathan Hall, the independent reviewer of terrorism legislation, made. And I think you're raising a reasonable point, and that's why the inquiry, I think, needs to look at that issue as well, because as Jonathan Hall said, if the government isn't open and transparent, or as open and transparent as it can be, then misinformation can fill the void and potentially can have terrible consequences. So that is a really important question, and the inquiry needs to look at it in a calm and measured way to reach a view.
Shadow Home Secretary Chris Philp, the time has beaten us. I've got to say goodbye to you. Thank you very much indeed for your comments this morning. Thank you.
Thank you.
Paul Coyte, he's got what happened in the football last night and what's happening today at the Australian Open.
Yeah, Chelsea beat Wolves 3-1, so they've ended this 5-game winless streak. Chelsea moving to 4th, Champions League tonight. Liverpool, who are top. Currently, it's the penultimate round in the Champions League before it gets to the knockouts. They play Lille from France, Monaco, play Aston Villa. That's at 5:45 this afternoon. In the tennis, there's one thing I want to mention. Coco Gauff, one of the favourites for the Australian Open, was beaten by Spaniard Paula Badoza. Now, I don't know whether you know them.
Terrible to be called Coco, wouldn't it?
Oh, not if you're Coco Chanel.
Yeah, Coco Chanel, but Coco Pops.
Coco Pops, yeah. She was a very good tennis player. Great backhand. Yeah.
It's a strange name, isn't it?
Yeah.
Alistair, our director, said, is that what she calls her dad?
What?
Very good. Coco Pops.
Oh, Coco Pops.
Yes.
Yeah.
Very good, Alistair, very good.
But 41 unforced errors in one game, Coco made, which is exactly the same amount of unforced errors I did during the show yesterday.
Indeed.
What are the chances?
Whose birthday is it today?
Well, you tell me. Let's have a look. You've got some good birthdays today. First one, please. Who and how old? Are we ready?
See, Paul's too busy, or Alistair's too busy telling jokes to worry about what's coming up.
Come on,
next.
I'll give you a clue.
Here we go.
He's a darts player. What are you? There he is. For crying out loud, we've got him.
Littler.
How old is Luke Littler today? Should both get this, because all we do is talk about how old he is.
I know this.
Go on.
I know this too. Ready? 1, 2, 3. 18.
18.
Wait, you let me go first. 18.
18 is the right answer. 18 is the right answer. Let's go for someone else. There we are. It's an easy one. Oh, look at that's the Golden Bear. Jack Nicklaus.
Oh, she's changed a bit, hasn't it?
Well, there he is. The Open 3 times, 6 times the Masters, US Open 4 times. One of the greatest of all time.
I think he's 80.
80 for Jack Nicklaus. He won the Masters age 46 in the 80s, that was. So how old?
86, 7.
85.
Ah, well,
85 for Jack Nicklaus. Time for one more?
Yeah.
Quick one.
Let's go with another one. Oh, it's Phil Thompson, old friend of ours. Phil Thompson, Liverpool legend. How old is Phil?
I would say
today?
Phil is... I'd say he's about 65.
Oh, undercooking, Phil. Undercooking him. Ellie?
70.
1.
I'm very
71. Bad. One more.
OK.
Who's this? Tennis player. It's Laura Robson. Tennis player Laura Robson. She won the silver medal with Andy Murray, 2012 Olympics. Retired at 28. But how old is she today? Commentary.
She is 42.
42. Bit overcooking that one, I think.
Oh, OK.
So she's not as old as 42?
Nowhere near as old as 42.
Oh, dear.
So she won 2012. She was very young, played with Andy Murray in the Olympics where she won the
38.
silver. She retired 31.
Oh,
31.
God,
What?
we are over
31 today. 31
All
today.
right.
Yeah, retired
Thanks,
early.
Coyte.
You're welcome. At least you got Luke Littler. That's okay.
We did. We've got one. Well done, us. But still to come, we'll be going through the papers next. But first, if you're in search of some winter sun, here is the forecast for the top European holiday destinations.
Can't wait to get in that sea.
Lovely and warm.
Just like the feeling of having great travel insurance.
All Clear Travel Insurance sponsors GB News travel destinations forecast.
Some winter sunshine likely for the next couple of days in Sardinia and also Sicily, but some showers in Cyprus and some pretty wet conditions across the Canaries and Madeira for the next couple of days. The same weather system bringing soggy skies to Portugal also, and some wet weather across southern parts of France, some snow over the Alps. Showers in Cyprus, they'll still be there on Thursday, but they should be easing by Friday, and the rain in the Canaries will be easing by Friday as well, and temperatures over 20 degrees here.
All Clear Travel Insurance sponsors GB News travel destinations forecast.
I'm Andrew Pearce. This is GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
I'm Christopher Hope. From pop stars to politicians, I'll interview anybody in a pub who's got a political opinion. Join me every Friday on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, YouTube or gbnews.com, or wherever you get your podcasts.
This is GB News, the People's Channel.
Good afternoon, Britain. Weekdays from midday.
People living with obesity are people, and they deserve the right for treatment and care as much as anyone else. What we need to understand is that obesity is a chronic condition, or a disease, as some people call it. It's not a choice. And this is the bit that people really struggle with, is that people think this is a lifestyle choice and people have done this to themselves. What we now know is the science and the evidence shows us that this isn't a choice. People have genetic predispositions for living with obesity. What we need to do is be a bit more compassionate and caring to people that live with obesity and support them to make healthier choices, not actually just discriminate and tell them that they're doing something wrong when, you know, if I had asthma, for instance, you wouldn't be saying the same thing to me there. But then it's exactly the same.
Usually, if you're going for an operation of some form or other, there'll be often there is a criteria. So my mother, she had a knee operation. They wanted to make sure her blood pressure was right and all these things. This is, I mean, to hear somebody say that obesity isn't a choice just because you've got genetic predisposition to it, it's just exactly why people seem to be legitimizing being overweight. Ozempic has proved that people are overweight because they eat too much. Because Ozempic tells you to stop eating, it makes you think that you've eaten and makes you feel full, so you don't eat. You may be predisposed to anything, but you also have a large percentage of responsibility to make sure that doesn't happen. So absolutely, it is in the patient's best interests, because if you're overweight, it'll take you longer to heal. You're more likely to have complications, the same if you smoke, and also the outcomes are usually better. So for a smoker, if you quit, say 4 weeks before surgery, your 25%, your risk is lower of respiratory complications. So this is literally, of course, it's discriminatory, because you have to decide, you have to prioritise the people that are likely to survive the operations.
GB News, the People's Channel.
If you want your news to be straight talking...
This is the nightmare for the Conservatives again.
Down to earth.
It's not just Nottingham where this is happening, is it?
And most importantly, honest.
Hard-working, middle-class taxpayers, they'll get their book thrown at them.
They catch me, Martin Daubney, Monday to Friday, 3 till 6 p.m. on GB News, Britain's news channel.
I'm Bev Turner. Thank you for joining us on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Laura McKevitt and Andy Williams with the big stories we're going to talk about today. And we've decided to talk about the inauguration of President Trump for the second time. And the thing, Lauren, that got you was the mix of people in the room.
Yeah, absolutely. It was a fascinating group of people sitting around him. First, I found it interesting that Boris Johnson was in the rotunda for the inauguration and Nigel Farage was not.
Interesting.
I thought that was a very, very interesting... I think Nigel's going to have some explaining to do to his crowd of fans.
Almost as though Nigel has overplayed his closeness to Donald Trump.
It's almost like... It's almost like...
Well, no, he had loyal Republicans who weren't in the room yesterday, and actually we were speaking to a Republican.
But why would you have Boris Johnson in the room?
You had the likes of tech bros and stuff.
Why would you have Boris Johnson and not Keir Starmer, for instance?
Well, there's never been a Prime Minister who's attended an inauguration, ever.
But why would Boris Johnson be there?
Well, they're friends.
I didn't realise they were that close.
Apparently they're friends. And I think that's very interesting when it comes...
Morgan there?
When it comes to how much Nigel Farage has played upon his influence over the presidency. I think it's interesting that it's Boris Johnson who is in there and not him. But there's also, you know, Elon Musk and Jeff Bezos and the guy from TikTok, who's obviously the subject of very intense discussion and negotiation this week over the ban, which was a bipartisan ban on TikTok and is not about free speech and is, in fact, about the fact that the CCP, and there's this golden share ownership of TikTok, which means that the president of China owns a section of TikTok, which is banned in China itself.
Okay.
I mean, some big questions on that.
But the future is these high-tech bosses who were all there, the Zuckerbergs and whatever, all being there, Elon Musk, whatever. Yeah. So the future's in their direction. Melania Trump, who Ellie says is really beautiful, I'm not disagreeing, Ellie, dressed really well. Trouble is, every time her husband leant in to kiss her, he couldn't do it because her brim...
The brim of the hat was too wide.
Yeah, yes. So he couldn't actually do it.
Yeah, that made for one of the social
that's
media
quite wide. You couldn't get under that, really, could you, Ellie?
You couldn't. Well, he tried.
No.
And failed, yeah. It was a viral moment from yesterday, of which there were many, actually. Some very awkward interactions, weren't there, at the inauguration?
What I found really fascinating was the interaction between the various former presidents. You know, Hillary Clinton's there having had a really brutal campaign against Donald Trump. 8 years ago. He said some horrendous things about her, and she was there at times openly laughing when he was saying, we're going to rename the Gulf of Mexico the Gulf of America. She was just there cracking up in the corner. George W. Bush was sort of behaving like a naughty schoolboy.
I enjoy that George Bush has no poker face whatsoever. He's completely incapable of sort of keeping a blank, sort of photographable face throughout one of these events.
But you can tell one of the things that unites all of those ex-presidents is they all think they were all looking at it and thinking this is completely out of kilter with any other.
We are through the looking glass now.
Yeah.
Now, a lot of eyes also were on Jeff Bezos as the tech tycoon's fiancée, Lauren Sanchez. So let's have a look at her and see what got everybody talking. Now, Ellie, talk us through.
So she was wearing a white bra, white lacy lingerie, with a deep-cut white blazer, I think I'd describe that as, and she was front row behind Donald Trump.
Now, when we came in this morning, you were outraged by this, and I sort of
I don't think it's appropriate, no. Does anyone think that's appropriate attire? And everybody was staring at her.
She looks all right to me.
Well, I'm sure she does.
Well, she looked all right to Mark Zuckerberg as well.
Exactly.
In a bar or a club, that would be fine, but not at...
Maybe that's where she came from.
Maybe that's where she was going to. Who knows?
So,
you know what I did think?
Well, it's for the day-to-night merger. Fashion magazines are always talking about how to dress for day-to-night, right? But maybe she's just, master... Exactly.
When you've got the inauguration at 12 and dinner at 8 or whatever, yeah.
Exactly. Very good. But talking about perhaps
is that Bezos, the baldy one? Is that him?
Bezos. Yeah.
He's no looker, is he?
Well, he's very rich.
And what was it that attracted you to your multi-billionaire husband?
To the founder of Amazon.
I think it was very classy yesterday. Baron Trump, the 18-year-old Baron Trump, crossed the aisle yesterday to shake hands with former President Biden and Kamala Harris. He didn't need to do that, and I thought, you've been raised well to go over and shake hands. Don't know what he said to him, but that was a lovely moment, I thought.
I think he's building up his part, personally.
Do you?
He's an 18-year-old kid. What's it got to do with him? But I noticed that his dad gives him the big introduction and all that sort of thing.
The crowd went
But
wild
I also
for him
enjoyed
yesterday.
there was a point where I think the president was talking about how they were going to put the stars and stripes on Mars, and they panned to Elon, who's whooping, and Barron in the front is going, I'm clearly going to be governor of Mars.
We're going to ban you. Thanks, guys. Here's the weather.
Heavy showers first thing will be followed by a warm, cosy day. Boxed boilers, sponsors of weather on GB News.
Morning. Yes, it's time for your latest weather update from the Met Office here on GB News. There's a few dense patches of fog around this morning. For most, it's another fairly drab day, but we should see some sunny spells across parts of Scotland and Northern Ireland. Dull and damp over the far northwest of Wales and parts of northwest England. Rain and drizzle at times getting into northeast England too. Elsewhere, many places will stay dry. A few showers creeping into western parts of Scotland. Some patchy rain and drizzle for a time over eastern Scotland, but we should see some brightness across northern Scotland, a good chunk of Northern Ireland seeing some sunny spells. England and Wales staying quite misty and murky, may brighten up a little bit, but overall dull and pretty chilly with temperatures in most places not getting above 6 or 7 Celsius. The winds are fairly light, and that will allow, again, things to turn quite misty and murky through this evening, and overnight some fog patches will thicken up. Still some rain and drizzle over the Pennines through parts of Yorkshire and at times around the coast of northwest Wales. Much of Northern Ireland, central and eastern Scotland like to have clear skies this evening. A hint of blue on the chart. Temperatures will quickly here dip down below freezing where we have clear skies, but in western Scotland we'll continue to see quite a lot of cloud, a bit of a breeze blowing in a few showers here, which could turn heavy as we head into Wednesday. A bit more patchy rain developing across the south as well. That's going to lead to a fairly damp start to tomorrow morning here, and still, as I said, some mist and fog around. Where we've got clear skies, we will see those temperatures dipping down below freezing, maybe -1 or -2. Most places just about staying above freezing, but still a pretty cold start to Wednesday. Cold and damp too across East Anglia and the southeast of England. Rain on and off for much of the day here tomorrow. A drier, brighter day for northwest England and North Wales. Some sunny spells here, quite breezy at times in western Scotland with a few showers, but elsewhere we should see some sunny spells. Staying on the chilly side, however, things may well turn pretty wet and windy at the end of the week.
Expect a warm front, moving from the kitchen right through to the rest of the house. Boxed boilers, sponsors of weather on GB News.
The latest GB News travel. Good morning, I'm Russell Holding. In the Highland, the A9 is closed north of Invergordon after an accident. The M54 in Shropshire is blocked eastbound by an accident just after junction 3 at Albrighton, causing queues. There's disruption to most departures at Luton Airport because of fog. The M25 in Essex, there are anti-clockwise queues towards an accident half a mile before junction 29. For the A127, the queues back to the Dartford tunnels. In London, the A315 is blocked eastbound by an accident on the High Street in Hounslow, causing delays. On the M26 in Kent, it's taking half an hour in westbound queues approaching the M25 because of roadworks. Gatwick Express train services are suspended between Gatwick Airport and Brighton because of a signalling problem and track fault, with Thameslink and Southern reporting delays of up to 50 minutes. And train services in Hampshire are suspended between Brockenhurst and Livingston Pier because of a shortage of staff. That's the latest.
You can stay up to date throughout the day by visiting our website, gbnews.com.
There's just 2 weeks left to grab your chance to win our biggest cash prize so far. £50,000 in tax-free cash. How would you react if you won?
Oh my God.
That's a big surprise.
Amazing. Just the best feeling ever.
Oh, in shock. That is absolutely fantastic.
Thank you.
For another chance to win, text cash to 63232. One entry costs £2 plus one standard network rate message. Or text bonus to 63232. 5 entries cost £5 plus one standard network rate message. Go to gbnews.com/win. Entries start from just £2. You can call 0903 681 3232. Calls cost £2 plus your network access charge. Or post your name and number to GB10 PO Box 8690 Derby DE1 9TT. UK only. Entrance must be 18 or over. Lines close at 6 p.m. on the 31st of January. Please check the closing time if listening or watching on demand. Good luck.
In the GB Newsroom, we bring you the news as it happens.
With our team of dedicated journalists across the UK,
we're ready to keep you up to date with what's happening every half an hour, every single day. Bulletins here on GB News,
the People's Channel,
Britain's news channel.
This is Britain's Newsroom, where your voice matters.
It's just astonishing. With expert analysis and honest opinion, we don't just keep you informed.
We bring you unique perspectives you won't see anywhere else.
Can't argue with any of that. When the news happens, it happens here.
On Britain's Newsroom, weekdays from 9:30 a.m.
Only on GB News.
If you want your news to be straight talking,
this is a nightmare for the Conservatives again.
Down to earth.
It's not just Nottingham where this is happening, is it?
And most importantly, honest.
Hard-working, middle-class taxpayers, they'll get their book thrown at them.
Then catch me, Martin Daubney, Monday to Friday, 3 till 6 p.m. on GB News, Britain's news channel.
Good morning. The face of evil. The Southport attacker was referred 3 times the anti-terrorism programme Prevent. Why was nothing done to stop him?
The Prime Minister will address the country today at 8:30 after being accused of a cover-up.
That's as the Home Secretary Yvette Cooper announces a public inquiry into the Southport stabbings.
Well, we'll also learn from the Prime Minister about a new commissioner to head the Prevent Counter-Extremism programme. The Home Secretary says that multiple agencies failed to stop Axel Rudikabana.
And you're witnessing the dawn of the golden age of America. That's what it's going to be. We're bringing it back. We're going to bring it back fast.
A new American golden age, Donald Trump sworn in for the second time as the 47th President of the United States. He gets straight to work, signing executive orders and pardoning January 6th rioters as supporters celebrate in Washington.
GB News can reveal that a grooming gang abuser is involved in attempts to convert a property into a children's care home in Leeds.
Abed Yunus was jailed in 2015 for being part of a gang that targeted a 12-year-old girl. And now we can expose a plot that he's involved with to convert a property he owns into a children's care home.
Prince Harry at the High Court. The Duke of Sussex will today file his claims against the Sun newspaper.
And in the sport this morning, after 5 games without a win, Chelsea beat Wolves 3-1. The Champions League returns tonight with Liverpool and Aston Villa playing, and Lewis Hamilton has had his first day at his new job in Italy.
In a nice coat.
Yeah.
There's a few dense fog patches around this morning. For many, it'll just be another fairly grey and chilly day, but a few places will see a little bit of blue sky. Join me later to find out where.
However you're watching, however you're listening, welcome to the programme. I'm Eamonn Holmes.
I'm Ellie Costello, and this is GB News Breakfast with Eamon and Ellie.
Hello, Paul. Good morning.
Good morning.
We have started something about this business of fridges.
Yeah.
Basically, well, Jane says, I remember my nan keeping milk in water, and when it was very hot, it was rank.
I bet it was.
Yeah, and so many things would have been rank. You could have kept things for such little time, and that's why, and so many of you telling me about a pantry.
That sounds nice.
Well, a pantry just wouldn't have been as warm as other places, but I suppose that's where you kept your meats and cheeses and various things like that, and your tomatoes, your vegetables would have been kept in the pantry.
Because when you say about milk, I know it goes off slightly, but you remember, I remember as a kid when they used to bring in the crate of milk, and then it was great during the winter because you put the straw in at school, so you'd have that. But during the summer, it was lumpy and it was
and then you would get Jimmy Smith or whatever who would blow down the straw.
Oh, that's right.
Blow bubbles into it.
I was Jimmy Smith.
Were you?
Yeah, I just realised.
Awful.
Horrible.
Jim says, don't laugh at poor Eamon. I was 22 years old and married with our son before we even had a fridge.
Yeah.
It was given to us by my wonderful mum, and it was a gas fridge like what you had.
Yes.
Before that, milk was put in a bucket of water, and we had a pantry, which was a cold place to store food.
Beverly, we never had a fridge in the 60s. I remember all our fridge items, milk in a bucket of water, they're saying again, butter, meat, etc. would be in our larder, on the marble or granite cold shelf. I also recall being told to keep the larder door shut to keep it cool in the summer. And you're right, I mean, gas fridges, all the rage. That's what it was about.
That's what it's about.
Tiny Tim used to come in and say, God bless us, every one of us as well at the same time. Lovely days. Very happy days.
The government has announced an inquiry into how the state failed to identify the risk posed by the Southport killer.
Axel Rudy Cabano pleaded guilty on Monday to murdering 3 girls in July after being referred 3 times to the anti-extremism programme Prevent amid concerns over his fixation with violence.
And the Home Secretary has said that the country needs independent answers on Prevent, while the Prime Minister described the 18-year-old as vile and sick.
Well, Yvette Cooper added that there were grave questions to answer on how the state failed to protect these 3 girls.
We should tell you that the Prime Minister will make a statement on all of this, on what happened in Southport from Downing Street. That's going to be live from 8:30, and we will be crossing there and taking that for you, so you will see it as it happens here on GB News Breakfast. Here's Mark White, our Home and Security Editor, with all of this. Where does this go from here, Mark?
Well, clearly, there's more to talk about in terms of this young man's background of violence, a fixation with death and violence spanning a number of years that saw him refer to this counter-extremism programme Prevent on not 1 but 3 separate occasions between 2019 and 2021. When he was just 13, he took a knife to school. He was excluded from school. He returned to school with a hockey stick and attacked a pupil there. There were real concerns expressed about his fixation with carrying out a school massacre, but somehow Prevent, the counter-extremism programme, felt that they were unable to deal with this individual because he was not, it seems, according to them anyway, aligned to any particular terrorist organisation. And the way Prevent works, of course, the counter-extremism programme, it looks at those who are attached either to jihadist terrorism or far-right terrorism, and it intervenes to try to steer them away from that ideology.
So what's the theory here, then? He wasn't really connected in anything politically, is that what we're saying? Or, you know, he's just a sheer murdering nutcase right from the start?
It seems to be the pattern and the picture that authorities will present over this individual, that he was obsessed with violence and death, and that in order to commit mass murder. He looked at various things like the Al-Qaeda handbook, jihadist handbook, and researched other mass killings as well.
My God, look at that picture. I mean, that is just the face of evilness. That is so scary looking. And I just wonder why this guy wasn't in some institution from the age of 10 or so.
Well, the fact is he was referred to multiple agencies, it seems, not just Prevent, but also the police, the courts, the youth justice system, social services, the NHS. None of them, although highlighting, I'm sure, some of the very worrying aspects of his personality, seem to have intervened to the point that they made any difference to the direction of travel of this young man. We're looking at that picture there of him staring so intently and sinister, in such a sinister way into the camera there. But when we were in court, this is a young man who wouldn't engage at all with the process. He stood in court with his jumper pulled up over much of his face, refused to talk to the judge in any way, shape or form. That's why it was such a surprise yesterday when he suddenly pleaded guilty to these charges.
What's your thinking as to why he would have done that or been advised to do that?
I don't know what was going on in his mind, but he was clearly, not willing in any way, shape or form to cooperate with the legal process that was happening around him. Suddenly, he's had a change of heart, maybe from advice from the lawyer. It's finally sunk in. And all that will be taken into consideration for the judge, of course, when he sits down on Thursday and passes sentence. But
it can't be a life sentence because of his age.
It will be a life sentence, but what it won't be is a whole life sentence, because someone as young as he was when he committed the crimes, which was 17, cannot be given a whole life tariff. So in other words, he will not stay in jail for the rest of his life. However, that doesn't mean that the judge can't pass a life sentence with, for instance, a minimum of 55 years or so that he might have to serve in jail before he's then eligible for release. So in effect, it's a whole life term.
We've got the Prime Minister speaking in 20 minutes' time. What are we expecting to hear from him, Mark? Because there are questions about the timing of all of this, about what was known when.
There are lots of questions to be answered, and they have not been answered in any satisfactory manner thus far. Of course, there's the background on this individual, but you've got already the Prime Minister, the Home Secretary, the Police and the Crown Prosecution Service saying the reason we couldn't tell you a bit more about this individual's background is because it could prejudice any upcoming trial. Well, precedent in the past has shown that we have been given some insight into an offender's links to other terrorist groups, perhaps some of his bad character, maybe not all, because there is potential for prejudicing there. But there's other issues, such as the fact that police within days had found and identified ricin, a deadly toxin that he'd been making in his home. They had identified a PDF file that contained this link to the Al-Qaeda jihadist document. Yet we waited 3 whole months before he was finally charged with these additional 2 charges, a terrorism charge and a biological weapons charge. 3 whole months before that was made public and those additional charges added. There's been no satisfactory explanation as to why they waited so long to add these charges to the indictment.
I just think of the poor parents of the bereaved. You have to go through all of this and listen to this and the intricacies of why this happened or that happened. Particularly awful for them.
Yeah. Well, there's one good thing about the fact that he has pleaded guilty, and that's that it will spare the parents having to sit through day after day looking at this individual in court if indeed he decided to turn up at all for the trial. But to hear in excruciating detail what happened to their loved ones in that dance class in Southport on the 31st of July last year. We will hear a bit of detail. The prosecution will outline in summary form what the case against him was. but it will be clearly very expedited and not as graphic as a full trial would have been. So that is one good thing, that they will be spared.
Just stay there and listen to this, because we're going to go to Southport to our reporter Sophie Reaper, and she's going to give us some of the atmosphere there. Sophie, good morning to you.
Well, good morning to you. I'm sure that you and Ellie both vividly remember that just less than 6 months ago, I stood here on this street around 100 yards down the road, a police cordon where members of the local community here in Southport had begun to lay flowers and messages of condolence after they'd been rocked by such a devastating and horrific attack. Now, that morning, I'm sure you'll remember that we didn't have many details whatsoever. We just knew that something truly horrific had taken place here at the Heart Space behind us. However, throughout that day, details did start to trickle in, and eventually we were able to bring you the names of those 3 little girls, Alice, Elsie and Bibi, who had tragically lost their lives at the hands of an attacker. Now, at the time, we knew the attacker was a 17-year-old who lived in the local area, but because of his age, because he was under 18, we were unable to reveal his identity. However, once he turned 18 in the coming months, because of a special order from a judge, we were able to bring you that name, Axel Rudakabana, and we were also able to bring you some more details of what happened on that tragic morning, that whilst those little girls were inside the Heart Space enjoying that Taylor Swift dance class with their friends, that down the road Axel Rudakabana was getting into a taxi armed with a 20-centimetre blade, ready to attack those children and carry out an attack that will blight the memory of Southport for many, many years to come.
Okay, Sophie Reaper there for us in Southport. Thank you very much.
Which brings us to our poll of the day, asking, do you trust a public inquiry to get the truth on all of this? A public inquiry, would it bring the truth to what happened in Southport? Have your say. We'll bring you the results as they turn out with Martin Dobney this afternoon.
Yep, if you want to get involved, just scan the QR code on your screen now or head to gbnews.com/poll.
A golden age of America has begun. That was the message from Donald Trump. He was sworn into office for the second time yesterday afternoon.
Well, almost straight away, he was signing off on a raft of executive orders, including some to reverse the actions of the now former President Biden. Jack Carson now looks back at what turned out to be an historic day.
So help me God. Congratulations, Mr. President.
In an historic inauguration, Donald Trump was sworn in as the 47th President of the United States. With extremely cold temperatures in Washington, the ceremony was moved indoors for the first time since Ronald Reagan's second inauguration in 1985. As dawn broke in D.C., security kept a watchful eye. The day began with Donald Trump attending a church service before meeting the Bidens, presenting to the world the peaceful transition of power. Thousands of Trump supporters queued for hours to be able to watch the ceremony from inside the Capital One arena.
Oh, I'm thrilled to death to be here. I'm just so happy that this day has come.
It's a really, really hard economy that we're living in right now, and I can't take it anymore. I'm so happy that Trump won.
Feel energetic. I'm so excited. I'm so happy for this.
As the guests arrived for the ceremony in the Capitol building's rotunda, members of Congress gathered with political and business leaders from across the globe. It wasn't long before former presidents took their seats, with one noticeable absence being former First Lady Michelle Obama.
The President-elect of the United States, the Honorable Donald John Trump.
A rapturous applause for the president-elect and a beaming smile on the face of the man whose policies over the next 4 years will shape the future of the world. Now Vice President Vance was the first to take his oath.
So help me God.
So help me God.
Congratulations, Mr. Vice President.
Then the moment for America's returning president arrived as Donald Trump took his oath of office from Chief Justice Roberts.
I, Donald John Trump, do solemnly swear.
I, Donald John Trump, do solemnly swear.
That I will faithfully execute.
That I will faithfully execute.
The office of President of the United States.
The office of President of the United States.
And as the new president hugged his family, a gun salute to the Commander-in-Chief. In his inaugural address, President Trump hailed the beginning of a golden age.
During every single day of the Trump administration, I will very simply put America first.
Speaking to America, there was one clear message.
We are one people, one family, and one glorious nation under God. So to every parent who dreams for their child, and every child who dreams for their future, I am with you, I will fight for you, and I will win for you. We are going to win like never before.
In a speech full of policy announcements, Trump declared a national emergency at the southern border, pledged to make the USA an energy superpower, and said he wanted to be known as a peacemaker. As the world watches on, the new president is getting straight to work.
The first item that President Trump is signing is the rescission of 78 Biden-era executive actions, executive orders, presidential memoranda, and others.
So this is January 6th. These are the hostages. Approximately 1,500 for a pardon.
Yes.
Full pardon.
Well, here in the studio we have spokesperson for Republicans overseas, UK, Jennifer Ewing. Jennifer, is this a new man we're seeing?
I think so, Eamonn. I think, first of all, he's had 4 years to learn and reflect on some of the mistakes he's made in the past. You add onto that, as has been discussed, he almost lost his life. I think that changes a person. He told us that, you know, he's there, but for the grace of God. That speech yesterday, I mean, it was shorter than we're used to, for sure. It was incredibly pragmatic. It was more serious. I think he could have rested on his laurels and said, hey, I won one term, I came back, I won again, I'm done. But he's clearly got an agenda, and hitting the ground running with a lot of these issues.
I think I read somewhere he's the oldest president ever to be sworn in.
Yeah.
Older than President Biden was.
That's true.
Yes. And as you say, hit the ground running. Over 200 executive orders signed yesterday. I mean, he had all of that prepared and ready to go, didn't he? One of the most controversial was pardoning all of those involved in the 6th of January riots. Now, that was interesting because we had J.D. Vance saying previously that the most violent offenders in that crowd would not get clemency, but Donald Trump went for the maximum pardon.
Yeah, that's interesting, and I haven't gone through every single case, and let's be honest, I think there was over 1 million people there that day, so some of the people just happened to be standing there, and other people broke the law, did damage, did violence, so there's a wide range. So until we go through every case, we won't know. But I think it's interesting to note that Joe Biden, gave a pardon to the J6 committee, without their being charged with anything. So I think there's more to come out with regards to this. I think there's more stories to break about what actually happened that day. So definitely something to watch.
He's declared a state of emergency straight away with the Mexican border. As well. Now, he's sending a lot of troops down there, I believe. So what form will that take, and what difference would that actually make to people's life on a day-to-day basis?
Sure, and a great question, and that is one of the two main things people who voted for him voted for, right, was control our southern border. It's a humanitarian crisis, and it's not just like immigration, it is mass migration that's been happening. So what's going to happen?
Is this an issue that concerns you?
100%, absolutely, and we welcome legal immigrants, but illegal is a problem. And that's why you saw he did so well with the Hispanic vote, because, a lot of these Mexican Americans, first, second, third generation, they're the American dream. They've come legally, had children. It's a lot of times it's their communities and their businesses that are being affected by this. But to go back to your question about how will this play out, well, Tom Homan, who's the new border czar, who's basically served over 6 presidents, so he's done the job in many different, the border. What he's going to be doing, it's going to be very targeted. It's going to be criminal, illegal immigrants. There's a lot of so-called low-hanging fruit that he's going to go after in some of these cities. It is not going to be breaking down the door and going after somebody's abuela that's been a cleaning lady for 30 years.
Jennifer, we've got to break off there, and we appreciate you being in after what's been an eventful evening for you as well.
Thank you very much.
Thank you very much.
Thanks for having me.
Thank you.
Now let's get a check on the weather now with Alex Deakin.
Despite the morning rain, it'll be a nice, warm, cosy day ahead. Boxed heat pumps, sponsors of weather on GB News.
Morning. Yes, it's time for your latest weather update from the Met Office here on GB News. There's a few dense patches of fog around this morning. For most, it's another fairly drab day, but we should see some sunny spells across parts of Scotland and Northern Ireland. Dull and damp over the far northwest of Wales and parts of northwest England. Rain and drizzle at times getting into northeast England too. Elsewhere, many places will stay dry. A few showers creeping into western parts of Scotland. Some patchy rain and drizzle for a time over eastern Scotland, but we should see some brightness across northern Scotland, a good chunk of Northern Ireland seeing some sunny spells. England and Wales staying quite misty and murky, may brighten up a little bit, but overall dull and pretty chilly with temperatures in most places not getting above 6 or 7 Celsius. The winds are fairly light, and that will allow, again, things to turn quite misty and murky through this evening, and overnight some fog patches will thicken up. Still some rain and drizzle over the Pennines through parts of Yorkshire and at times around the coast of northwest Wales. Much of Northern Ireland, central and eastern Scotland like to have clear skies this evening. A hint of blue on the chart. Temperatures will quickly here dip down below freezing where we have clear skies, but in western Scotland we'll continue to see quite a lot of cloud, a bit of a breeze blowing in a few showers here, which could turn heavy as we head into Wednesday. A bit more patchy rain developing across the south as well. That's going to lead to a fairly damp start to tomorrow morning here, and still, as I said, some mist and fog around. Where we've got clear skies, we will see those temperatures dipping down below freezing, maybe -1 or -2. Most places just about staying above freezing, but still a pretty cold start to Wednesday. Cold and damp too across East Anglia and the southeast of England. Rain on and off for much of the day here tomorrow. A drier, brighter day for northwest England and North Wales. Some sunny spells here, quite breezy at times in western Scotland with a few showers, but elsewhere we should see some sunny spells. Staying on the chilly side, however, things may well turn pretty wet and windy at the end of the week.
There will be a light breeze in the morning, leading to a warm front. Boxed heat pumps, sponsors of weather on GB News.
Now, how do you fancy £50,000 in your bank account? Well,
I fancy it.
So do I. Well, it's totally up for grabs. It's tax-free and you can spend it however you like. Here are all of the details that you need in our Great British Giveaway.
There's just 2 weeks left to grab your chance to win our biggest cash prize so far. £50,000 in tax-free cash. How would you react if you won?
Oh my God.
That's a big surprise.
Amazing. Just the best feeling ever.
I'm in shock. That is absolutely fantastic.
Thank you.
For another chance to win £50,000 cash, text cash to 63232. One entry costs £2 plus one standard network rate message. Or text bonus to 63232. 5 entries cost £5 plus one standard network rate message. Go to gbnews.com/win. Entries start from just £2. You can call 0903 681 3232. Calls cost £2 plus your network access charge. Or post your name and number to GB10 PO Box 8690 Derby DE1 9TT. UK only. Entrants must be 18 or over. Lines close at 6 p.m. on the 31st of January. Please check the closing time if listening or watching on demand. Good luck.
Still to come, we are referring to the rape gangs, the grooming gangs, and the idea by one of them that he could open a care home for children in Leeds. Back with that after this.
This is GB News, Britain's news channel.
And then fashionistas are keen to see which new trends are set to hit the catwalk.
Well, our next guest is very well placed to share her predictions with us after being a contestant on hit ITV series Dress the Nation, as well as being an upcycling and sewing consultant.
Wow. Joining us now is Tendai Murewe. I want to go back to you appearing on the ITV Dress the Nation.
Right.
Tell us about that experience. What was that like?
Oh, that was one of my highlights as an upcycling consultant. I learned to sew in my kitchen 5 years ago. And then, during COVID, just making masks. Then the next thing I was on a Dress the Nation, making dresses in front of TV. Yeah, it was just incredible. I think we all had all these clothes that we have, but we don't know what to do with them. So mainly I started with men's jackets, taking off the sleeves and putting it like a print on.
I've tried this. I've tried taking off my sleeves before. I now have about 3 jackets with no sleeves. I never managed to put them back on.
You need to come to a workshop. You need to come to a
I need an
workshop.
upcycling consultant. 2025, what can we expect fashion-wise?
I think bold prints are back. People are loving. I think you walk on the streets in frollals and oversized men's jackets.
So the exact opposite. We have drastically underperformed this morning. You're just saying not like us.
We just woke up this morning and thought it's winter, it's cold, it's grey.
Grey, miserable.
Is that not the way to go?
No, it is. It's still, I think because fashion is expressive. It's whatever you want to express yourself. You know?
GB News, the People's Channel.
Good Afternoon Britain isn't just about us. The wonderful thing about this programme is it's about everyone watching. It's an interactive programme.
Well, there absolutely is something to see here, and we're going to be talking about it more. Whether it's breaking royal news, Will, please bring us up to date, or indeed a particularly punchy speech in the House of Commons.
Very, very curious.
We bring it to you live, and then we bring you live reaction as well.
That's Good Afternoon Britain, weekdays from midday.
Only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Join me, Camilla Tominey, for a frank and honest discussion with those in power that cuts through the spin and gets to the heart of the issues shaping our nation.
You haven't confirmed that you want to stand as leader, but you haven't ruled it out either.
This report basically says that he's not fit to stand trial. Is he indecisive? Incompetent? I deliver the dose of reality Westminster needs. That's the Camilla Tominey Show at 9:30 every Sunday on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Very disturbing story now. This is a GB News exclusive, and we can reveal that a grooming gang abuser is involved in attempting to convert a property in Leeds into, and you just couldn't make this up, a children's care home.
Yes, Abid Yunus, who was jailed for 2.5 years in 2015 after being convicted of sexual activity with a child, is the owner of a property that is being converted into a children's care home.
This and so many other stories connected with what's gone on here, revealed by Charlie Peters, our reporter on this one. You just couldn't make it up, Charlie.
It is an astonishing story. And Abid Yunus, this convicted child abuser, he was part of a 10-strong gang that targeted a 12-year-old girl between 2010 and 2012. A 2.5-year jail sentence on the smaller end of what others in the gang received for the horrendous and sordid abuse that they perpetrated on that young girl. But years later, almost a decade later after that conviction, he is now involved in these attempts to convert a significant property that he owns in Leeds into a children's care home. Now, the application was put into Leeds City Council last month. We've seen it, but there are some confusing elements within the application. There are attempts, we believe, to change the names on the application, potentially to avoid being noticed as their prior links with child abuse. For example, Abid Yunus, in some planning applications he's submitted that we've seen, occasionally lists himself as Mr. A. Hussein rather than Yunus. The owner and the planning agent behind it also changes his name from Omar to Faz, Mr. Faz Farouk instead of Omar Farouk. And the care services company, they're listed on that application as well. So plenty of names there, but it appears that none of them were able to own up to the fact that the person owning the property, the person who they would need the support of to get this children's care home running up in Beeston in Leeds, was a convicted child abuser.
Well, now that you have revealed this couldn't go ahead, surely.
Well, I have seen statements put forward by local councillors last night suggesting that they were now going to challenge this problem. They couldn't support it, but it's a shocking situation.
It's a really serious story, and thank you so much for your hard work on it. Let's cross to
The senseless, barbaric murder of 3 young girls in Southport is a devastating moment in our history. No words come anywhere close to expressing the brutality and horror in this case. every parent in Britain will have had the same thought. It could have been anywhere. It could have been our children. But it was Southport. It was Bibi, 6 years old. Elsie, 7. Alice, 9. Back in August, I said there would be a time for questions, but that first justice had to be done, and that above all, we must not interfere with the work of the police, the prosecutors, and the delivery of that justice. Well, yesterday, thankfully, a measure of justice was done, but it won't bring those girls back to their families, and it won't remove the trauma from the lives of those who were injured. Their lives will never be the same. So before I turn to the questions that must now be answered, for the families and the nation, I first want to recognise their unimaginable grief, because I know the whole country grieves for them. The tragedy of the Southport killings must be a line in the sand for Britain. We must make sure the names of those 3 young girls are not associated with the vile perpetrator, but instead with a fundamental change in how Britain protects its citizens and its children. In pursuit of that, we must, of course, ask and answer difficult questions. Questions that should be far-reaching, unburdened by cultural or institutional sensitivities, and driven only by the pursuit of justice. That is what we owe the families. The responsibility for this barbaric act lies, as it always does, with the vile individual who carried it out. But that is no comfort, and more importantly, it is no excuse. And so, as part of the inquiry launched by the Home Secretary yesterday, I will not let any institution of the state deflect from their failure. Failure which, in this case, frankly, leaps off the page. For example, the perpetrator was referred to the PREVENT programme on 3 separate occasions. In 2019, once, and in 2021, twice. Yet on each of these occasions, a judgment was made that he did not meet the threshold for intervention, a judgment that was clearly wrong and which failed those families. And I acknowledge that here today. Throughout this case, to this point, we have only been focused on justice. If this trial had collapsed because I or anyone else had revealed crucial details while the police were investigating, while the case was being built, while we were awaiting a verdict, then the vile individual who committed these crimes would have walked away a free man. The prospect of justice destroyed for the victims and their families. I would never do that, and nobody would ever forgive me if I had. That is why the law of this country forbade me or anyone else from disclosing details sooner. Nonetheless, it is now time for those questions. And the first of those is whether this was a terrorist attack. The blunt truth here is that this case is a sign. Britain now faces a new threat. Terrorism has changed. In the past, the predominant threat was highly organised groups with clear political intent, groups like Al-Qaeda. That threat, of course, remains. But now, alongside that, we also see acts of extreme violence perpetrated by loners, misfits, young men in their bedroom, accessing all manner of material online, desperate for notoriety, sometimes inspired by traditional terrorist groups, but fixated on that extreme violence, seemingly for its own sake. Now, it may well be that people like this are harder to spot, but we can't shrug our shoulders and accept that. We can't have a national security system that fails to tackle people who are a danger to our values, our security, our children. We have to be ready to face every threat. And when I look through the details of this case, the extreme nature of the violence, the meticulous plan to attack young children in a place of joy and safety, violence clearly intended to terrorise, then I understand why people wonder what the word terrorism means. And so if the law needs to change to recognise this new and dangerous threat, then we will change it, and quickly. And we will also review our entire counter-extremist system to make sure we have what we need to defeat it. Now, that work is already underway. I've tasked Sir David Anderson Casey, the new independent Prevent Commissioner, to hold this system to account, to shine a light into its darkest corners, so the British people can have confidence that action will follow words. But I have to say, to face up to this new threat, there are also bigger questions. Questions such as how we protect our children from the tidal wave of violence freely available online. Because you can't tell me that the material this individual viewed before committing these murders should be accessible on mainstream social media platforms, that with just a few clicks, people can watch video after horrific video. Videos that in some cases are never taken down. No, that cannot be right. But it's not just the nightmares of the online world, because when you wake from a nightmare, the first thing you do is reassure yourself with reality. But for far too many people, the state of our society no longer does that. Now, people will say this is all because of immigration, or all because of funding cuts. But in truth, neither tells us anything like the full story, or explains this case properly. No, this goes deeper. A growing sense that the rights and responsibilities that we owe to one another, the set of unwritten rules that hold a nation together, have in recent years been ripped apart. Children who've stopped going to school since the pandemic. Young people who've opted out of work or education. More and more people retreating into parallel lives, whether through failures of integration or just a country slowly turning away from itself. Wounds that politics, for all that it may have contributed, must try to heal. Thirdly, there are also questions about the accountability of the Whitehall and Westminster system, a system that is far too often driven by circling the institutional wagons, that does not react until justice is either hard won by campaigners or until appalling tragedies like this finally spur a degree of action. Time and again we see this pattern. And people are right to be angry about it. I'm angry about it. Southport must be a line in the sand. So nothing will be off the table in this inquiry. Nothing. And most importantly, it will lead to change. I know people will be watching right now, and they'll be saying, we've heard all this before, the promises, the sorrow, the inquiry that comes and goes, an inability to change that, frankly, has become the oxygen of wider conspiracy. And we've seen that throughout this case. A suggestion that there has been a cover-up. I want to put on record that yesterday's guilty verdict only happened because hundreds, if not thousands, of dedicated public servants worked towards it, many of whom endured absolutely harrowing circumstances, particularly in the police and the Crown Prosecution Service. That is their job. They are brilliant at it. But we should never forget their service to our country. Law and order depend on them. And yet I'm under no illusions that until the wider state shows the country it can change, not just what it delivers for people, but also its culture, then this atmosphere of mistrust will remain. So I want to be crystal clear in front of the British people today. We will leave no stone unturned. I was the prosecutor who first spotted failures in grooming cases in my institution, the CPS, 14 years ago. And I was the prosecutor who first did something about it by bringing the rape gangs in Rochdale to justice. And so my approach as Prime Minister will be no different. If any shortcomings are now holding back the ability of this country to keep its citizens and its children safe, I will find them and I will root them out. Because when it comes to justice, the failure to be transparent is not only disgraceful on its own terms, it is also the enemy of strong communities. It spreads suspicion more widely and allows division to win. I remember when this happened, in those dark days of the summer. And I remember that, like now, the whole country grieved for Southport. But I also remember how it was profoundly moved by their example. Because even as that community faced an unimaginable evil, even as they had to endure mindless violence, bricks and bottles thrown at their community, their businesses, their mosque, police officers attacked, including those who are on the scene responding to this vile murder. Even despite all of that, they chose to come together. They chose to pick up the pieces of their lives. They chose to rebuild, brick by brick, side by side. Strangers no longer strangers, a community. This country has no shortage of empathy for the people of Southport. I know that. But in the face of such darkness and tragedy, what we really should do is follow their example. That is what we need to face this new threat. But also something more. Because national renewal isn't just about public services or the economy. It's about turning us back towards ourselves, giving people confidence in a shared future, so people can once again see the strength and power in themselves and in this nation. But that can only begin today, by holding up the mirror and facing what we see. So wherever this inquiry goes, we will follow it. No matter the boats it will rock, no matter the vested interests it will threaten, we won't hide. But then, most importantly of all, we will act. Because this time it will be different. Southport will be a line in the sand. We will honour those 3 little girls and deliver not just justice, but the change that the people and families of Southport deserve. Thank you. I will now take a number of questions from the media, starting with Vicky Young from the BBC.
Prime Minister, you are a person with years of experience as a senior prosecutor. Do you really need a public inquiry to tell you that the system needs to change? And isn't there the possibility that that delay could mean that other dangerous cases are missed in the meantime?
Well, I think we need a public inquiry to answer all of the questions that the families, the people of Southport and the country have about this case, and to ensure that no stone is unturned, that every failure is exposed and dealt with. I also think we need an inquiry because we are dealing with a new cohort, a different threat, this individualised extreme violence, and we have to have the laws and framework in place to deal with it. But I accept your challenge. We shouldn't wait until the end of the inquiry before we start the change. And that's why already there's been a review of what happened with Prevent and the findings and learnings from that, so that the mistakes that were made then would not be made today. That is really important in reassuring the public. Why we've appointed a commissioner to look into that whole part of the apparatus, and why we will get on with some of the work we need to get on with changing, for example, the law when it comes to the framework for dealing with extreme violence. So we do need the inquiry so we have the full picture, full accountability, and every single question that the families have is properly answered in the proper way. But we need to get on with the change in the meantime, and to reassure the public that every step is being taken to protect their children. Thank you. Beth Rigby, Sky News.
Beth Rigby, Sky News, thank you. Prime Minister, it now emerges the perpetrator was known to the authorities and had been referred to Prevent, the anti-terrorism programme, 3 times. He'd had contact with the police, the courts, the justice, the youth system and mental health services. It's a catastrophic failure of the state to protect those young girls. Do you acknowledge that if that information had come out when the riots were happening, it would have provoked further outrage by the public, so you withheld information? Is that true? And do you acknowledge that whatever happens now, whatever public inquiry you carry out, this will hugely undermine trust from the public in the authorities and your government? Thank you.
Thank you, Beth. Let me be clear. Responsibility for the disorder and the violence lies with those that perpetrated it. And we need to be really clear about that. But let me address the facts as you put them to me. There has been a failure here, and I don't intend to let any institution of the state deflect from their failures, and I acknowledge that readily here. Yes, I knew the details as they were emerging. That is the usual practice in a case such as this. But you know, and I know, that it would not have been right to disclose those details. The only losers, if the details had been disclosed, would be the victims and the families, because it ran the risk the trial would collapse. I'm never going to do that. Never going to do that, because they deserve that justice. And only by having the rules in place can that justice be delivered, as a measure of it now has. And I wouldn't be forgiven if I had. Those are not just my choices, though it is a choice I would make. It is also the law of the land. That is why I couldn't disclose the details. It's why others couldn't disclose the details. It's why all of you as journalists couldn't disclose the details, because the same laws applied to you just as they applied to me. And it's really important that we make that clear. But the purpose of the rule is to protect the justice that the families and the victims are entitled to. I think that's the right thing. It is now right, having got to this stage, that the questions are asked and the answers are given, which is why we've taken the course of an inquiry, but also why between now and the conclusion of the inquiry, we will happily answer any questions that are put to us. But that is why, notwithstanding that, yes, I was being kept updated, of course, I did not disclose anything that would collapse the trial and defeat justice in this case. And I don't think anybody could ever have looked the victims and their families in the eye if they'd ever done that. Thank you, Beth. Can I have Paul Brand, please, from ITV?
Paul Brand from ITV. Thank you, Prime Minister. All of us, as you say, as journalists, understand the risk of contempt of court, of prejudicing a trial, but we live in a different age now, don't we, where misinformation and disinformation spreads at lightning speed online. I was in Southport on the day of the attacks. There was a short window in which information could have been released before charge, before any risk of prejudicing a trial. Why didn't you do that? And do you think it was a mistake not to provide that detail then?
Firstly, let me address part of your... Look, it is true that we live in a different age in that information is now available online as well as offline. And I understand the frustration of all, but including some journalists who observe the rules and don't report what they know because they know that the law doesn't permit it and it runs the risk of collapsing a trial, only to see information online that doesn't appear to be following the same rules. And that is not acceptable. That has to be addressed and will be part of what we will be looking at, because that can't be right. But in relation to the central thrust of your question, the importance of the rule about not disclosing this information is to ensure that the trial can take place and that where an individual is guilty, they're held to account, as has now happened in this case. And that is why the law carefully restricts what can be said by anyone, not just me as Prime Minister, but anybody in these circumstances, and it is done to protect the family and their victims. That is the right thing, and that is what the law requires. It's also the choice I would make to ensure that my first thoughts are about justice for the victims and their families. That, for me, is first and foremost. Yes, we can answer questions, and we are now doing so with this inquiry and everything that will happen before the end of that inquiry. That is quite right. But it is also right that the families who've been through unimaginable grief at least have the comfort now of an outcome in this particular case. And you would be putting very different questions to me if I had disclosed information and we were now faced with a decision that the trial had just collapsed and the families would never get justice. You would rightly be challenging me very, very hard about why I disclosed information. Thank you very much, Paul. Chris from GB News.
Chris Hope, GB News. Prime Minister, given what we know now about the terror link and how it's kept from the public, do you now regret blaming the far right for all those protests last summer? Was it a far right issue, or were some people entitled to be concerned and upset, not the rioters, of course?
Responsibility for the violence lies with them that perpetrated it. I was in Southport the day after these terrible murders. I was acknowledging and thanking the frontline police officers and ambulance who had been at the scene. You can imagine what they had been through. They were back at work the next day. They were saying it was just their job. I could see in their eyes the impact it had had on them, what they had to deal with, what they had to see, how they endured that. As I arrived back in London, those same officers were putting their riot gear on and having bricks thrown at them. Those same officers. I don't think anybody can justify that, nor should they attempt to do so. Thank you, Chris. Harry from The Sun.
Thank you, Prime Minister. Sorry to labour this point, but I think it's important. All summer we were repeatedly told that the Southport attack was not terror-related, wasn't being treated as terror-related. That wasn't true. Because in October, this monster was charged with a terror offence. Now, information was put into the public domain then that didn't collapse the trial. It didn't jeopardise justice. It was just months later. Now, you say you knew about the ricin and the Al-Qaeda bomb manual, and it was known to the authorities. Did you know about that personally? At the same time, the public, the press, and the police were saying this is not terror-related, because I think that's the nub of the issue, and that's what's upset people. You say you couldn't speak out publicly, that you couldn't do that, but didn't the public have a right to know, not least the neighbours who had ricin being produced on their street? Surely they had a right to know.
Well, I think there are two separate and important issues there, Harry. The first is on the question of terrorism and what constitutes terrorism. And my concern in this case is that we have clearly got an example of extreme violence, individualised violence, that we have to protect our children from and our citizens from. And it is a new threat. It's not what we would have usually thought of as terrorism when definitions were drawn up, when guidelines were put in place, when the framework was put in place. And we have to recognise that here today, because I think most people would say, looking at the facts of this case, it's clearly extreme violence, it's clearly intended to terrorise. And I completely accept and understand that, and that is my view. Therefore, we have to make sure that the law and the framework for responding is appropriate to the new threat that we face. And there we will make whatever changes are necessary in the law to deal with it. On the second point, yes, of course I was kept up to date with the facts as they were emerging. That is usual practice. But just like you, as a journalist, I had to observe the law of the land. It was not my personal decision to withhold this information, any more than it was a journalist's personal decision not to print or write about it. That is the law of the land that is in place for the reasons I've set out, to protect the integrity of the system, to ensure that the victims and their families get the justice that they deserve. Thank you, Harry. And Jason from the Mail.
Thanks, PM. Jason Groves from the Daily Mail. It sounds from what you're saying like you personally consider this to have been a terrorist attack in the ordinary sense of the word. Is that right? And also, it sounds like you don't think that this is a one-off. Should people be worried, and are we going to need further protections in schools, youth centres, because this guy seems to have had some sort of obsession with school massacres?
Well, thank you for raising that, because I think this is a really central issue, because, as I say, this is extreme violence, clearly intended to terrorise, and my concern is that because it is different to the sort of behaviour we've associated with terrorism, Al-Qaeda, there are plenty of other examples, which tended to be more organised in groups with a clear political ideology and motive. Because it's not that, it is a new and different threat, it doesn't fit as well as it should within our framework, within our toolbox. And that is what we've got to change. That is the urgent question that has to be addressed. And it's one that has to be addressed before the conclusion of the inquiry. And it's why we've already done the learning from the prevent mistakes. But it is that cohort. I do think it's new. You've seen versions of it in America with some of the mass shootings in schools. It is not an isolated, ghastly example. It is, in my view, an example of a different kind of threat. And that is why I'm absolutely so determined that we will rise to that challenge and make sure that our law, our response, is capable, appropriate, and can deal with that sort of threat. But that is my concern, that is my thinking, that this is a new threat, individualised, extreme violence, obsessive, often following online viewing of material from all sorts of different sources. It is not a one-off. It is something that we all need to understand and have a shared undertaking to deal with within our society. And that is not just the laws on terrorism, the framework on terrorism, it's also the laws on what we can access online. We still have rules in place in this country about what you can see at a cinema. And yet online, you can access no end of material. We have to ensure that we can rise to this new challenge, and that is what I'm determined to do. Thank you all very much indeed. Thank you.
It's just gone 9 a.m. You're watching and listening to GB News Breakfast. We've just heard the Prime Minister giving a statement in Downing Street.
Yeah, we'll be getting more reaction to that right after this short break. Oh, no, there's no break. So what is there?
In that statement, the Prime Minister has said the Southport killings must be a line in the sand for Britain, and there must be fundamental change in how the country protects its children.
OK, terrorism has changed, he says, with acts of extreme violence carried out by loners, by misfits, young men in their bedrooms.
This follows the government announcing an inquiry into how the state failed to identify the risk posed by the Southport killer, Axel Rudakabana. Well, we're joined now by GB News Home and Security Editor Mark White, who was listening to that alongside us. Mark, what was your assessment of what you just heard?
Well, a few points. You know, he speaks about the failure of multiple agencies, including the Prevent Counter-Extremism programme, police, courts, youth justice system, the NHS, social services and the like, and that is true, and that will be addressed by the public inquiry. But the other issue, the issue that is of great concern to people around the country who felt that information on Axel Rudakabana was being suppressed, I'm not sure it was answered in a satisfactory manner at all. You had the Prime Minister saying that what they didn't want to do was reveal information which could prejudice any upcoming trial. Well, the fact is that bad character information about his background, to an extent, that would have been part of the prosecution case against him at trial anyway. So you would not be revealing anything that wouldn't be put before the jury in the fullness of time. And as was pointed out by one of the reporters in questioning the Prime Minister there was a window before he was charged where clearly they knew he'd been known to the authorities, referred to Prevent. That kind of information could have gone out there and perhaps would have helped fill that vacuum that was instead filled with rumour and anger and then disorder.
He's a lawyer. That's what he is, and that's what he puts first. I mean, I regard my job as a journalist is to challenge legal advice. I simply go through, lawyers dictate, they say you can't say this, you can't say that. I always say, why not? How come? Surely there's a way around this. They have a blanket ban on everything. His job is to speak to the general public, to accommodate what people think, not to... I mean, of course he has an argument that he can't ruin the case that's been built up and all that sort of thing, but I just think he's a lawyer. He speaks as a lawyer, not as a politician.
These criminal cases are robust. I've covered them for many, many years. Judges always tell the jury, disregard everything that you've heard in the media or elsewhere before, judge it on the facts before you. There is little to no risk of genuinely prejudicing a trial by putting some of this information out there, but everything to be gained by being frank with the public and helping fill that vacuum.
And one of those things to be gained was a lack of disruption on the streets. I mean, to take that terrible disruption that happened, and there surely was a responsibility on his behalf towards what ensued.
Yes, indeed. Another aspect, and one of the questions was about the information on the ricin toxin, the deadly toxin found at his home address. Just a day or so after the attacks, the PDF file that was linked to the Al-Qaeda jihadi database that he had been accessing as well, that was known to Keir Starmer and others just days after the attacks. Yet we waited 3 whole months before those additional charges, a terror charge and a biological weapons charge, was added to the indictment. The public, the media, no one was told about these other charges. And they still have not, I don't think, answered in a satisfactory way why it took so long to bring those charges or reveal that those charges were being added to the indictment. And that will just, I think, compound the suspicions that many people have that information was being suppressed, that perhaps it was just felt to be too volatile, that it could, if this new information, these new charges were revealed, it could lead to more in the way of violence.
What did you make of the Prime Minister saying that terrorism had changed, that we were now dealing with a new threat of loners and misfits?
Well, this is an important point, and he is right on that point. I was at Scotland Yard just before Christmas attending a briefing by Counter-Terror Command about this new and emerging threat. That, yes, of course, we have the traditional political terrorism aligned to groups like Al-Qaeda and ISIS or groups on the far right. But there is a cohort, particularly of young people, young men, who during lockdown and in the years after have been accessing material, extremist material, and have been influenced by that without not necessarily being aligned to a specific group, but as this individual appears to have had, a sickening obsession with violence and death, and researching whatever he could to carry out an attack that would cause maximum casualties. And I think what Sir Keir Starmer was getting at there was that, you know, the definition of terrorism needs to be changed. He said they would be willing to change the law to ensure that the kind of planning for mass attacks like we saw in Southport would really then come under the umbrella of a terrorist attack.
What could an inquiry do? Because it can't bring these 3 beautiful little girls back.
Yeah.
What can it do to potentially protect those in the future? I mean, the Prime Minister was saying he'd leave no stone unturned and nothing will be off the table. But what does that actually mean? Well,
you'll get an inquiry, of course, where there will be light shone on the failings. We'll hear about this. There'll be collective hand-wringing and a determination that this should never happen again. But I heard all this after the 7/7 bombings in 2005, after the 2017 attacks on London Bridge, where individuals were known to the authorities, where opportunities were missed. The Manchester Arena bombing, where the bomber was known to authorities, where opportunities were missed. Every time we're told lessons must be learned. We can't let this happen again. There has to be a line in the sand. And every time new events take place that shock the nation, and then subsequently we learn that people aren't just acting in isolation. People don't just carry out mass attacks in isolation. They're on a journey, and in that journey, they come across the radar of police, security services, social services and other agencies on that journey of becoming increasingly extreme. This young man came across the radars of many of these agencies who all failed to act in a meaningful way. And yes, he says it's a line in the sand, but I think we can confidently predict that in the future we'll see other horrific tragedies, and we'll investigate the background of individuals, and we'll find that opportunities were missed.
Sadly, that's probably very true. What we're going to do now, Mark, is go up to Southport. Sophie Reaper is there for us this morning to tell us what the reaction was to what the Prime Minister had to say. Sophie.
Well, this was a community, of course, you'll remember, that was left reeling in the wake of such a horrendous attack which took place here on Hart Street, at the Hart space just behind me. This is a community that was devastated. This is a community that was heartbroken, but this is also a community that was angry. We saw, of course, in the days following the attack, the riots that broke out, the first one taking place just up the road here in Southport, and that is because the community here are angry with what they feel are these failings. We heard Sir Keir Starmer there talking about if the law needs to change, then it will. But I think it will be a long time before the community here in Southport will even consider being able to forgive the failings that allowed such a horrific attack to take place. And that, of course, to add insult to injury, becomes worse when you think about the details that have come out in the past 24 hours. The details of how Axel Rudakabana, armed with a 20-centimetre kitchen knife, got in a taxi, made the journey here to the Hart space and entered the room, and quite graphic details that were set to emerge in court. Of course, he made that change to plea yesterday, so we will now only get an outline, as Mark White was saying, at the sentencing on Thursday. But we also heard, for example, that Axel Rudakabana had booked a taxi the week before to take him to his former high school, which his dad had to prevent him from making that journey. So when those sorts of details come out and we hear about how it could essentially have been prevented and how those three little girls, Alice, Elsie and Bibi, how their deaths could have been prevented, I think that really does spark anger here, not just in this community in Southport, but it's going to continue to spark anger across the UK.
Sophie, the thing that amazes me is why did he choose where he chose, where those little girls were singing and dancing? Had he any connection with their location at all?
Well, as far as we know, Eamonn, there was no connection. We know with the journey he'd planned the week before to that high school that it was his former high school that he'd been expelled from. But when speaking to Merseyside police, they found no evidence whatsoever that he even knew that this class was taking place. Of course, it would seem that he did know, but there's been no connection made between Axel Rudikabana and the class itself. So it is, of course, police tell us, still an ongoing investigation, a live investigation, so it could be that in the future we do learn perhaps why he targeted this particular class. But something we do know is that this was a class with children. This was a class with vulnerable young children who were simply enjoying the start of their summer holiday, singing, dancing, making friendship bracelets. Should have been an incredibly happy, sunny summer's day, but instead it became one of the most tragic incidents that this country has witnessed for many years.
That's terrific. Sophie Reaper there for us in Southport. Thank you very much indeed. And Mark White is still with us now, our Home and Security Editor. And as Sophie was just describing there was a plot that we now understand was the week before this incident in Southport, where Axel Rudikabana was armed with a knife trying to get into a taxi to go to the school that he'd just been expelled from. That plot was stopped by his dad. So Axel Rudikabana's family have questions to answer, don't they?
Yes, I think it's a very pertinent point that Sophie raised there about the family and what they might have known. Now, as there's no trial, and as there will only be a summary on Thursday of the case, will we get to the bottom of that? Will we have to wait to get an inquiry? But it seems that he was planning some kind of an attack at his former high school, where he was expelled from for carrying a knife into that school, for attacking a pupil at that school with a hockey stick. And what did his father know? Clearly, he pleaded with the taxi driver not to take him on that 15-mile journey. If he knew something, why didn't he alert the authorities? And if he did know something and didn't alert the authorities, are there additional charges that could now be brought against family members?
We just heard the Prime Minister answering questions there from journalists, one of which was from Christopher Hope, asking if he has regrets for describing those involved in the unrest in the summer as far right. Were you satisfied with the Prime Minister's answer?
Well, no, because he didn't answer that at all. He just spoke about having visited Southport, seen the emergency services who had to deal with the horror of the attack, and then came back to London to see those same police officers donning their riot gear to deal with the disorder. But the fact is, I was actually at that Downing Street news conference when the Prime Minister stood up at the same position and told us all quite confidently that the riots that we were seeing were being orchestrated by the far right, who were travelling on trains to locations around the country to take part in this disorder. I wasn't allowed to ask a question in that press conference, or I would have challenged them on that particular assumption, where the information was coming from, because all of the trials or subsequent court cases that we saw, 450 people who have now been prosecuted. The vast majority, if not all, of the people that were prosecuted were people from the local areas where the disorder had taken place. They were not individuals who had travelled from further afield to get to those locations. So some important points about, the finger pointing that he was doing for the far right versus genuine anger and grievances in communities over lots of issues that have been building up over years, the vacuum with the lack of information that was being filled by rumours that haven't been answered in any kind of satisfactory way.
Well, Mark, thanks for your answers today. Thank you very much indeed. Good to having you here listening to that. We're looking to you as to, do you have a view on all of this, and would you want to register your say? So today's poll ties into all of this and asks simply, do you trust a public inquiry to get the truth as to what happened on Southport? OK, so we'll bring you a final result on that with Martin Dobney after 3 o'clock today.
Yep, and if you want to get involved in that poll, just go to gbnews.com/poll. Now, still to come, Prince Harry's legal action against the publisher of the Sun newspaper is due to begin today. We'll be telling you all about that next.
I'm Emily Carver. This is GB News, Britain's news channel.
In the GB Newsroom, we bring you the news as it happens.
With our team of dedicated journalists across the UK.
We're ready to keep you up to date with what's happening every half an hour, every single day. Bulletins here on GB News.
The People's Channel.
Britain's news channel.
Britain's Newsroom. Weekday mornings from 9:30.
Mr. Motivator, he joins us now. Mr. Motivator, a very happy new year to you. Thank you so much for joining us on the show. There you are, bright and early. So how are things? How can we all kick ourselves into shape?
By the end of January, most people have thrown their New Year's resolution out the window. I think what's important is that we make a change for life, and we set ourselves small goals, and as we achieve those goals, then we reward ourselves. And in other words, you want to run 10K, you don't immediately get up and go run 10K, do you? You run between 2 lampposts and walk between 20. If you're not into running, don't choose running. If you're into dancing, that's great. If you're into any kind of movement, that is the way to keep yourself active, healthy, and also maintain your independence.
So, Derek, is the point that you keep it manageable and small enough that it's achievable?
Why don't we just find 4 exercises that you do for 1 minute each exercise, and you do that 4 times a day? Achievable, isn't it? That's only 4 minutes of exercise. And I guarantee at the end of the day, you'd have done 12 minutes, which is like your daily dozen. So there's your goal. I want to do a daily dozen of exercise lasting a minute each, right? And the first thing you could be doing is getting up from your chair, right? The moment you stand up, you incorporate so many muscles in your legs, right, that you're going to feel good, yes? So,
right, go on then. Get up off your chair, Adam. Show me how it's done.
Easy, come on.
Easy, yeah. Look at
no
that.
hand. The next thing I want you to do is to reach up real high. And if you bring it down, up
I'll
and
do
down.
that one.
Yeah.
For a minute, palms facing.
Oh, for a minute?
You're not flying a minute. That's better.
There we go.
GB News, the People's Channel.
I'm Christopher Hope. From pop star to politicians, I'll interview anybody in a pub who's got a political opinion. Join me every Friday on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, YouTube or gbnews.com, or wherever you get your podcasts. This is GB News, the People's Channel.
I'm Tom Harwood. This is GB News, Britain's news channel.
Now, how do you fancy £50,000 in your bank account? Well, it's all up for grabs in the Great British Giveaway. Here are all of the details that you need.
There's just 2 weeks left to grab your chance to win our biggest cash prize so far. £50,000 in tax-free cash. How would you react if you won?
Oh my God.
That's a big surprise.
Amazing. Just the best feeling ever.
I'm in shock. That is absolutely fantastic.
Thank you.
For another chance to win £50,000 cash, text cash to 63232. One entry costs £2 plus 1 standard network rate message. Or text bonus to 63232. 5 entries cost £5 plus 1 standard network rate message. Go to gbnews.com/win. Entries start from just just £2. You can call 0903 681 3232. Calls cost £2 plus your network access charge. Or post your name and number to GB10 PO Box 8690 Derby DE1 9TT. UK only. Entrance must be 18 or over. Lines close at 6 p.m. on the 31st of January. Please check the closing time if listening or watching on demand. Good luck.
Prince Harry's legal action against the publisher of The Sun newspaper over allegations of unlawful information gathering is due to begin today.
Yes, the Duke of Sussex will appear alongside former Labour Deputy Leader Tom Watson in continuing their claims against News Group newspapers. Well, The Sun have always denied any unlawful activity.
Let's go to our royal correspondent, Cameron Walker, and he will fill us in as to what's likely to happen today and the timetable of events. Cameron, good morning.
Good morning, Eamonn. Well, this is going to be an incredibly messy trial. There's a lot of money, there's a lot of reputations, and of course, in Prince Harry's case, family relationships on the line. Now, you may have noticed the world's media have kind of descended on this High Court building in central London this morning. Prince Harry, I understand, will not be here in person on day one of his trial, although he is expected to give 4 days of evidence inside this building next month in February. Now, there were originally at least 39 claimants in this case against News Group newspapers, including Catherine Tate, the actor, Mel C, former Spice Girl, and Hugh Grant, the actor, as well. All of them have settled apart from 2. In Hugh Grant's case, he has said publicly that it just simply would have cost too much money to bring this case to trial. Now, it's Prince Harry and former Deputy Labour Party leader Tom Watson who are taking this case all the way to trial. They are determined to have their day in court, it would appear. And Prince Harry sees it really as his life's mission to get justice, as he sees it, for the alleged victims of unlawful information gathering. His allegations face around 200 articles between 1996 and 2011. I'm going to hand back to the studio. News Group newspapers denies all the allegations made against them.
Walker there for us at the Royal Courts Justice. Thank you very much.
At 9:30, Britain's Newsroom, we've got Andrew and Miriam, and I think Bev Turner's out in Washington still.
She is.
What's happening there. Guys, it's been a busy morning here today, all very hectic, building to a culmination at 9 o'clock this morning.
Yes, well, we're going to have lots more on that breaking news, the Starmer speech about...
See, Starmer doesn't talk like a Prime Minister, he just talks like a lawyer.
Yeah. He's not a leader, he is a lawyer. He's not a lawyer. He's not a leader, he's a lawyer.
Yeah, that's what I think. I mean, he's not giving what the public want or what you think you should have at this stage and what sort of information you can give or not. He just talks like a lawyer, and I believe our job as journalists always is to challenge lawyers.
Quite right.
Yeah,
yes.
right. Yeah.
Yes, and you always get the impression that he's not saying everything that he knows, and certainly that's the impression that's been given so far since this awful murder. And so I think it's going to be difficult for people to trust him and the authorities that it will all come out now.
And he said of an inquiry, we know anything about the inquiry? Who's going to chair it? Who's going to lead it? It's not going to be... I mean,
all we know is nothing will be off the table.
Nothing will be off the table. Light will shine here. Cliche followed cliche. Yeah, honestly, cliche followed cliche. And if we think about the grooming gangs inquiry, 7 years, and they spent 2 weeks of 7 years talking about grooming gangs. So I think this inquiry is, again, kicking it down the road. There were massive failures.
Well, I know you guys will be talking about it, taking it further from 9:30. We will say thank you and goodbye to you, and goodbye to you watching and listening out there.
Yeah, we'll be back at 6 a.m. tomorrow. Let's have a look at the weather.
Heavy showers first thing will be followed by a warm, cosy day. Boxed Boilers, sponsors of weather on GB News.
Morning. Yes, it's time for your latest weather update from the Met Office here on GB News. There's a few dense patches of fog around this morning. For most, it's another fairly drab day, but we should see some sunny spells across parts of Scotland and Northern Ireland. Dull and damp over the far northwest of Wales and parts of northwest England. Rain and drizzle at times getting into northeast England too. Elsewhere, many places will stay dry. A few showers creeping into western parts of Scotland. Some patchy rain and drizzle for a time over eastern Scotland, but we should see some brightness across northern Scotland, a good chunk of Northern Ireland seeing some sunny spells. England and Wales staying quite misty and murky, may brighten up a little bit, but overall dull and pretty chilly with temperatures in most places not getting above 6 or 7 Celsius. The winds are fairly light, and that will allow, again, things to turn quite misty and murky through this evening, and overnight some fog patches will thicken up. Still some rain and drizzle over the Pennines through parts of Yorkshire and at times around the coast of northwest Wales. Much of Northern Ireland, central and eastern Scotland likely to have clear skies this evening. A hint of blue on the chart. Temperatures will quickly here dip down below freezing where we have clear skies, but in western Scotland we'll continue to see quite a lot of cloud, a bit of a breeze blowing in a few showers here, which could turn heavy as we head into Wednesday. A bit more patchy rain developing across the south as well. That's going to lead to a fairly damp start to tomorrow morning here, and still, as I said, some mist and fog around. Where we've got clear skies, we will see those temperatures dipping down below freezing, maybe -1 or -2. Most places just about staying above freezing, but still a pretty cold start to Wednesday. Cold and damp too across East Anglia and the southeast of England. Rain on and off for much of the day here tomorrow. A drier, brighter day for northwest England and North Wales. Some sunny spells here, quite breezy at times in western Scotland with a few showers, but elsewhere we should see some sunny spells. Staying on the chilly side, however, things may well turn pretty wet and windy at the end of the week.
Expect a warm front, moving from the kitchen right through to the rest of the house. Boxed Boilers, sponsors of weather on GB News.
The latest GB News travel.
Good morning, I'm Russell Holding. In the Highland, the A9 is closed in both directions north of Invergordon after an accident causing queues. In Aberdeenshire, the A96 is blocked westbound where a car caught fire between Kinella and Kintore, with queues towards Inverurie. In Northumberland, the A69 is blocked eastbound by an accident between Greenhead and Holt Whistle. The M61 in Lancashire is blocked northbound by an accident between junctions 8 and 9 from Chorley to the M65, causing queues. In Suffolk on the A14, there's a lane closed eastbound at junction 53 near Ipswich after an accident with queues back beyond junction 51 at Needham Market. The M25 in Essex, all lanes have reopened now anti-clockwise towards junction 29 for the A127 after an accident and breakdown. Still long delays though back through the Dartford tunnels, back to junction 3 for the M20, and delays of up to 2.5 hours to Irish ferry sailings between Dover and Calais.
You can stay up to date throughout the day by visiting our website gbnews.com.
This is GB News, Britain's news channel.
We were talking earlier about the issue of Siri listening to you. Well, it's not just your own conversations being sort of harvested for data, but it's a problem with AI. So what seems to have happened yesterday is that Apple issued a alert saying that Luke Littler had won the darts before he had. I mean, imagine what would, if he then gone on to lose, how that would have looked. I mean, obviously, because he went on to win